I would like to start by asking each of you to just take a few minutes and just, there are going to be people who are not going to watch this entire video on YouTube. They're going to say, I'm not watching it. And this might be the only time in their entire life they ever get to hear what you have to say. So if you had 3 minutes to just say what in all your experience, the summation of where you're at with the subject of cancer that you would like to open with, to present what your basic thoughts or point of view or what you think is important to say, why don't each of you just open up before I ask questions with 3 minutes and just give us some of your best, clearest, up-to-date thought on the subject of cancer and the cancer industry.
I'm trying to turn it on, sorry. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to use this one for the moment. So I'll start in 3 minutes. So I started out as an artist. I've worked on a lot of TV and film projects. I'd never done a documentary. I was living in New York. I found out about this guy, Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski. I had a day job doing special effects, doing other stuff. I had the means to make a film, but I never made one before. But I had no idea what I was in store for. I thought it was a good story from a biographical point of view. I wasn't trying to be some sort of cancer activist or anything of the sort. But when I dug deeper, and I didn't realize what a path this was going to take me on for the next 10 years of my life. But since we're talking about the cancer industry, there's something I'm going to get out of the way right now. When I had this film kind of wrapped up, being the sort of young, naive kind of activist, I'm going to change the world with this movie, once I realized what I had, something did happen to me that really was a sobering experience and really put things into perspective. It was late 2009. The film was complete, but it wasn't released yet. Brzezinski, which we can talk about later, had been given permission for phase 3 randomized studies for a very, very rare childhood brain tumor. This is the holy grail of testing. There's a person helping him raise money, a very expensive trial, like $150 million. You have the FDA signed off on this. It's ready to go to the next stage. Let's find some hospitals to, get these off the ground. The guy who was in charge of raising the money happened to be an old college buddy of David Axelrod, who was President Obama's chief of staff and chief architect to get him elected. And this was, again, Obama had just been elected. I got this call saying, I'm meeting with Axelrod next week in DC. Where's your movie at? Give it to me in whatever form you've got. So I overnighted it, very excited, hardly could wait to hear this response. Honestly, quite naive. A couple of weeks go by, Axelrod and he cross paths again. And again, this is college buddy to college buddy. This wasn't on the record, but I had communication with this guy. He says Axelrod saw the movie and says, this is really important, but it's just too big. Too big. Maybe in 10 years we can face this. Not now. Too big. Then he went on to allude how the banks had just failed a year prior, and that what this could potentially do to the market if this was released. Because what Brzezinski has discovered, and what a lot of clever people, he's not alone, have discovered, is something that can disrupt a $4 trillion industry. When I say that, I did the math. You have 15 million Americans living with cancer. I know from family members and people that have gone through it, easily a $250,000 price tag per cancer patient through the course of the treatment. Yeah, Medicare, Medicaid covers it. I'm talking about the mainstream stuff. You multiply $250,000 times 15 million people, you're pushing $4 trillion. That is huge. So it's not necessarily, I don't find it be black and white, good and evil. I just think it's a systemic problem. We have a profit-based system. We have a machine that has been created over time that has created this industry. And if you created a cure for cancer, people think, oh, you're going to be worth $1 billion. Yeah, until the patents run out, until it becomes generic like the antibiotic. You're going to put yourself out of business if you create something that innovative. Sure, Steve Jobs created something huge, but he created a whole new market. The internet created a new market. Cancer, you make an innovation that big, you're destroying an entire market. So I can go on this forever. But that's sort of like my little quick 3 minutes about the cancer industry and my world in this as a journalist. So,
Thank you all. Can you hear me okay? No? Now, okay, I guess we have to speak real close. Tom Seyfried, professor, Boston College. We publish our papers in peer-reviewed academic journals. We came into this field through work on brain cancer using calorie-restricted diets, and then asked simply, why is this working? And then it goes right back to Otto Heinrich Warburg from Germany, Nobel Prize winner, one of the dominant scientists of the 20th century. He actually had defined the origin of cancer as a mitochondrial metabolic disease. So we followed up on that. There had been a lot of controversy regarding his discovery. When Watson and Crick had discovered the DNA, his ideas were pretty much thrown under the bus, and the field ran off thinking that cancer is a genetic disease. So what we did was simply go back and read all of his papers, link our findings in the research to what Otto Warburg had said, and now we recently published a big paper in ASN Neuro Journal, open access, so anybody can read it. It's technically difficult, I have to be honest with you. But basically what we found was that Otto Warburg was in fact correct. He had accurately defined the origin of cancer. It is a disease of energy metabolism. It is not a genetic disease. So once you realize that, then the therapies that we can use to manage the disease become far more logical and non-toxic. But as we've just heard, it may take quite some time. And I know you haven't heard my presentation, but I will be presenting the scientific evidence to support what I'm saying.
So our story started back in 1952 when I was just a little guy, and our founder, Ann Wigmore, was told by the Harvard doctors she had 90 days to live. She had advanced stage 4 colon cancer. She had grown up as a peasant girl in Lithuania, and her surrogate grandmom, the village doctor, was mending people who were in war back to health with herbs and food. So when she closed the door of her home and cried a bit in Boston in the early 50s, she recalled grandmom helping people come back to life. So started to employ those very basic, simple principles that all doctors employed a century ago and before. She heals herself. And of course, the doctors were not interested at all. So she said, if they're not interested, and there are thousands and thousands of people suffering, I'm going to open an institute. So before there was an alternative field, a holistic field, natural doctors, none of it existed. In the shadows of Harvard and Boston College and Boston University and Tufts University, the first lifestyle medicine school and center was open. In the early days before I was there, I joined the team in '75, almost 100% of who came had stage 4 cancers. Today, half the people that come to us have stage 3 or stage 4. It's rare they show up with 1 or 2. Because most of us are so brainwashed by the system, we have to fail and fail and fail before we're willing to take charge of our life. So I've had the great blessing, this is my 48th year of working in the field of natural health care. I had the privilege to work in Europe at health centers and developed centers in the 1970s. That's when I met my wife, Anna Maria, who was running one of those centers. And I've worked with 265,000 people, of which over 100,000 of those people have had advanced cancers. And here's what I have to say to you, that there is no possibility that people cannot reverse cancer naturally. 100% of everyone potentially can reverse stage 4 advanced cancer. I don't say this because I've read a book or I've done only research, which we do, clinical research daily. I have known thousands of people have reversed advanced cancer. I've worked with them. And we do not take credit for that. As Thomas just wisely said, Warburg, who won the Nobel Prize in the 1930s, told you it's your metabolism and its oxygen levels that has everything to do with what we today call epigenetics. So our lifestyle medicine, and we work with Dr. Rao, the top doctor from Europe. He's at the Institute as we speak. Dr. Maharaj, the top stem cell doctor. These are part of our team, and some of them are faculty. And we do the most advanced healthcare available today. In this auditorium, you have people who had stage 4 cancer and were told by Sloan they were going to die, and they're alive years later. And we'll introduce you to them later. So wake up and take charge of your life and realize you're a human being. And there's nothing you can't do once you're willing and ready to do it.
You know, when illness strikes, we think we have a bad karma or God is punishing us. And that is not the fact. That's not true in any which way. You know that there's so many other factors, but it comes to the emotions, and we spend time and time again with every guest that comes to the Institute talking about what happened. Every guest that comes to the Institute gets psychology. When Louise Hay, the esoteric visionary, came, and she wrote many books through their time at the Institute, and she ended up with colon cancer herself. She had to use her own therapy, and she realized that her colon cancer had to do with resentment and anger. And so many times I see that anger. So then you wonder, was it anger? Is it a part that anger caused the cancer, or is cancer just talking through the voice of anger? Either or. It's very, very important to work with this psychology. Food for us is easy. When you come, for example, to the Institute, we have the best nutrition you ever could get. And that's simple. You don't maybe like it the first week. By the third week, you think our chefs have new recipes, and you're like, why didn't they make this food the first week? Because you changed. And it is, of course, seeing the chemistry. You know, I used to look at blood under microscope for about 20 years. Magnifies a tiny little drop of your blood so you would actually see what's going on inside your body. And the cells have a memory of all the traumas that have happened, physical and emotional. So they're running around with this trauma, and unless we learn how to heal that emotionally, we are not ever going to heal our whole body, because we can exercise all day long and we can take the best food and tons of supplements. That is not going to be enough, because your attitude, the way your emotion play a role, is huge. And you know, we see, of course, so many people come to the Institute that have done some really tough treatments, where treatments have caused more damage before it even got to their cancer, where they are paying the price with problems that cost their immune system huge ineffectively, so that your immune system is actually totally inadequate, which should be there for you, which have been there for you. Since you started as an embryo in your mother's womb, you have built up your immune system, so it should be top-notch. But so many things have happened in your life with pollution and chemicals and non-foods, processed foods, and stress, and working too hard and not sleeping. So it's a lot. But I want to point out the emotional part, because it's huge. Thank you.
The cancer industry draws its lifeblood from fear and disinformation, basically. You're scared to death, literally. That's where the term comes from. You go in, you're diagnosed, you've not been feeling well, and the doctor looks at you and says, you're going to die in 6 months. And they instill fear into you. Not because they're bad people, but because what they've been taught, they don't know how to treat cancer. They're afraid as well, because they can't treat you adequately. And disinformation, the disinformation is that your body is somehow sick because you're chemically deficient. You don't have enough poison in your body, so a sick body, they're going to poison with chemotherapy. Not that there's not a place that chemotherapy can work with certain cancers, but you're not sick because you're chemically deficient. So that's how the cancer industry remains, is through fear and disinformation. Anne-Marie just mentioned the emotional aspect of cancer, and I have to agree completely. I just got through this summer, went to Asia for almost a complete month and went to 7 different countries. And right now we're producing our next documentary called Eastern Medicine Journey Through Asia. And it will be the interviews that I got with those Eastern medicine, traditional Chinese doctors in those 7 countries. We went to Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and India. Every one of those countries, they focus on the emotions. They focus on the anger, the resentment, the bitterness, the fear, the negative emotions that can play a part in your sickness. In the United States, we're focused only on the physical, with the exception of people that we're sitting here at the table with. There are many good clinics, and Brian and Anna Marie have one of the best in the country focusing on the emotions. But typically in the United States, we think of that as woo-woo medicine, right? Somebody says, well, your emotions may play a part in your disease. And you're like, oh, you're one of those kooks, right? They call you a name, which is a technique that works. They make fun of you, call you a woo-woo or a kook, or if it comes to vaccines, you're a science denier. I don't want to get into that right now. I don't have time. I only have a couple minutes left, 30 seconds left. But the reality is, one of the worst things that you can do is rush into a treatment if you're diagnosed. Because what they'll do is they'll diagnose you on a Friday, and they'll tell you that Monday we got to start chemo, and we'll do the radiation as soon as that if we finish the round of chemo. And we'll do another round of chemo just in case. And the cancer didn't just happen overnight. It's been happening for a long time. And so that's why my lovely wife, Charlene, here on the front row, she's filming me, hey. That's why we do what we do, is because we lost 7 family members in the span of 7 years, and it was because they didn't know. They were not educated. And so we want to educate people that you do have options, that your nutrition does matter, that your emotions do matter, and that if you're diagnosed with cancer, you do have more options than just chemo, radiation, and surgery. And we want to educate people that they should be able to make that choice. We're all about just the right to choose. You're sick, you should have the right to try whatever treatment you think will work for you, and not be limited because an overarching government says, you know what, you can't do that. Even though, like Eric Merola down here, I'm preaching to the choir here, Dr. Brzezinski's anti-neoplastons work really, really well with brain cancer, but you can't use it unless you've gone through the big 3 in certain instances, and children are dying because they don't have access to these treatments that they should have the right to try. And that's all we want, is to educate people and let them make an informed decision. And if you don't have both sides of the coin, and you've only been taught that if you're sick with cancer, you can only do chemo, radiation, surgery, and all that nutrition detox stuff is a bunch of nonsense, you can't make an informed decision. And all we want is people to be able to make an informed decision, and then they can make their own mind up.
I'm Pam Popper, and my company, Wellness Form Health, has been in business for 24 years. And what we specialize in is informed medical decision making. Great lead-in for what I have to say. It has bothered me for a long, long time that you are required, the government requires that you have more information about a mortgage document than about healthcare treatment. You know, people go to jail for misrepresenting the interest rate on a mortgage. And people can lie to you, sometimes inadvertently, about treatment for something serious like cancer, and it's called the standard of care, the community standard of care. And so I have enjoyed my 24 years of work working with people who have all kinds of conditions, but the cancer patient is in a totally different situation than any other disease that we deal with in our office. And I'll tell you what that is. When somebody comes to our office, there are 2 or 3 things that make it different. When somebody comes to our office and comes to one of our dinners and they listen to what I or one of my staff have to say, and the person's sort of heading toward diabetes and says, I don't know, I think I'm just going to keep eating, drinking, and being merry. I don't really believe what she says. And then a year later, they find out that we were really right. They come back, we teach them how to reverse their diabetes with diet. No harm, no foul. 99% of the time, it turns out okay anyway. So the person may have, what we call it, drinking the medical Kool-Aid, believe their doctor, metformin is a good idea, whatever. But actually, a year of not doing the right thing, you can still recover. The cancer patient comes in, on the other hand, even at an early stage cancer, and says, well, I don't know, I'm kind of sketchy on this, not traditional medicine, blah, blah, blah. Goes back to the university medical center, agrees to the treatment, and how they find out it's not working is when the cancer comes back, and it usually does. Now the body is weakened from the treatment, and the cancer is worse. And this is not the time to be doing informed medical decision making. That needs to be backed up to the beginning, because that person, unlike the diabetic, unlike the person with high cholesterol, unlike the person who was just overweight or had lupus or something like that, they don't get the do-over. It doesn't come out okay. So that's the first thing that makes it different. The importance of the decision being right now has a level of urgency that we just don't have to deal with so much with other diseases. There's another thing that's important too. And you mentioned the doctors kind of shoving people into treatment. Today's Friday, you've been diagnosed. Monday, we'll take it out. Tuesday, you start something. So the doctors put a lot of pressure. They're not required to disclose the efficacy rates of their treatment. We help people demand it from their doctors, and they're shocked sometimes when they do get it, because it'll say, reduces your risk of recurrence, for example, by 2% and kills most people. I mean, it's unbelievable when you start looking at this on paper. But what happens in addition to the pressure from the doctor is the family members who are drinking medical Kool-Aid believe that this guy who graduated from Harvard at the medical center, you better listen to him because he or her. They know what they're doing. And so the family joins forces with the doctor to put the person has cancer. My gosh, they're barely functioning because of the shock of the whole thing. And now they've got their family, their friends, and a high-powered oncologist saying, I've had people tell me, my spouse has threatened to divorce me if I will not have this treatment. And so this is a horrific set of circumstances, and people need a team, and they need, as you said, information to make decisions. And believe it or not, the hardest thing that we have to deal with when we're helping people like this is giving them language and role-playing so they can get their family members to back off just long enough to think. We'll share all the information with you, won't make a decision without your input. I just want to take a few weeks to figure out what's going on. And even at that, sometimes it doesn't get everybody to back off. So my point in all of this is that the people who are abused the most in the system are the cancer patients, because they have everything to lose and they have very little time to figure out really what to do. They need to do something right away. And the pressure from everybody in their life, it's like on steroids compared to everything else. You decide not to take metformin, nobody's threatening you with divorce. You decide you're not going to have your breast amputated or have chemotherapy, and your husband's saying, if you're going to kill yourself, I'm not going to stay here and watch you do it. We've had this happen. Yeah. So anyway, my goal, by the way, just so you know, is one of these days it will be a federal criminal offense in the United States to not properly inform patients of their risks and options, just like it is in the mortgage business. And one of these days we're going to get that done. Thank you. Wow.
So, getting right to the punchline, the question that everyone would like me to ask is this: what percentage of cancer patients on chemo and radiation survive more than 5 years? What percent survive more than 10 years? And what percent of people who get, let's say we're talking about third stage cancer for the first two questions, and what percentage of third stage cancer patients following the best protocol you know of recover? And is there, aside from a one-off here and a one-off there, is there any science to back that up? So let me say that again. So regular person, what percentage of people following mainstream, so a stage 3 cancer person who follows mainstream cancer and radiation, what percent survive 5 years? What percent survive 10 years? And what percent of people with the same health condition, third stage cancer, following the best protocol you know of, recover? What percent would they recover? And what's the basis for you saying that?
Who do you want to start with?
Anyone who wants to comment on that?
I'll start. Somebody start. Go ahead.
I'll try it. It's a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
The statistics are simply not there. No. They're scattered throughout the scientific literature. The issue is that It's very hard because it's hard. We have a death, we know how many people a day, and I'll present this tomorrow, are dying. It's 1,600 people in the United States every day. The problem is you can't know, are they dying from their cancer or are they dying from the treatments? Let me give you an example. Some people say, well, I've survived 5 years, and they have a heart attack at 8 or 10 years after the treatment. The heart attack was the result of an irradiation causing the heart vessels to be less than flexible. Now, did that person die? They didn't die from their cancer, but they died from the treatment, indirectly. And there's a lot of those people. As a matter of fact, Dana-Farber, where I am in Boston, they opened up a new branch of medicine called cancer survivor medicine. And these are a new branch because we find that depression, cardiovascular disease, hormonal imbalances, digestive problems, all of a sudden people have all kinds of other health issues as the result of surviving chemo and radiation. And many of these people then become treated with other kinds of therapies, and they then sometimes don't do well and may even die. So it's very hard to get an exact number or an exact answer to your question because the data are simply scattered in different ways, even though the demographics and the people who collect all this information, there's always some loose ends. So I think it's a very difficult question to answer, but I think if it could be answered, it would not be good news. Let's put it that way.
I want to add to that, talking about the confusion about the data. Part of the problem in figuring out what the death rate is that we're now treating risk factors for cancer as if it is cancer. Ductal carcinoma in situ is not cancer. Lobular ductal carcinoma in situ is not cancer. But we detect it early with mammography. We treat it as if it's cancer. Those people would have been alive, those women would be alive 5 years later, no matter what, if you'd never done anything to them. But they go into the survivor category. And so now it looks like we're doing better in breast cancer, when actually if you can tease out, and it is very difficult to find, if you can tease out the actual number of women who have breast cancer, not a risk factor for cancer, because that's what those things are, but cancer, it wouldn't look so good. We don't know what it is, but it wouldn't look like it does. And by the way, one of the most abominable things I watch every year is women racing for the cure so they can raise more money to do more of this kind of thing, to skew the data more so that they can qualify for more research because they can spin the data to make it look like we're doing better when we're not.
Many years ago, a colleague, Michael Anderson, did some research that even stunned me. He said, you know, no other disease, as Pam rightfully said a few minutes ago, is treated like cancer in the pharmaceutical realm. That if you have diabetes and you go back to the doctor, even if you heal the diabetes, 20 years later, they're going to say you're the diabetic. They created a 5-year magic line for cancer because they've utterly failed with cancer, as Thomas will explain to you. So if, for instance, with something like brain cancer, with mainstream treatment, they have practically a 0 success rate, and they have 5,000 people they're looking at, and in the first year, 2,000 die, and in the second year, 2,000 die, and in the third year, 500 die. You know what I'm going to say now. And then it's 5 years and 1 day, they're going to tell you they have a 50% success rate. That's called a relative number. Now, I'd like you here in the room, as well as you listening around the world, to challenge what I'm saying. So this is where they came up with this 5-year. Also, medical journals I've read that literally state that when they look at long-term survival rates, decades, 93% of the people that are medically treated for cancer and seemingly did nothing else will eventually die from cancer. Now, that's not a very good success rate, is it? How about if you were to buy an automobile and they said 93% of the time it's going to blow up and you're going to crash in the car? But when they have control and they manipulate globally the cancer business, this is how they get away with that. So what we are best known for at Hippocrates, we're the only place in America like this, is when people fail around the world with their medical treatments, and as was so well said by Pam, are now devastated because their immune system is gone, because nuclear medicine destroys your immune system. And we now know 63% of the people after 5 years who had one form of cancer will end up with lymphoma because of the nuclear medicine they have. That's a statistic out of their own journals. We know that when people come to us and we give them an opportunity to rebuild their immune system, release some of the anger in their head, and do advanced treatments, electromagnetic therapy treatments, advanced IV treatments, we see many of these people's immune system fight and heal them. Doctors do not heal patients. Even the natural doctors have to get out of that business. We don't heal anyone. At best, if we're ethical and honest, we support the body's immune system comes back, and all of the thousands of people I've seen reverse cancer, it was our immune system that did it. Because we are pro-immune system, not destroying the immune system.
I hesitate to go into any kind of statistics because 82.7% of statistics are made up on the spot anyway, right? I interviewed Bobby Kennedy for The Truth About Vaccines, and one of his quotes was, "Statistics don't lie, but statisticians do." And you can rig a study to make it say whatever you want to. And so I do know that when it comes to the efficacy of chemoradiation, the longest study that I'm aware of that was done, the biggest study on chemotherapy agents was done at the Northern Sydney Cancer Centre in Sydney, Australia. And they looked at 22 different types of cancer, and they wanted to determine what contribution rate these chemos had to a 5-year survival rate. What was their contribution percentage? And they determined that in the United States, I think it was 2.1% of the people that lived 5 years lived that long because of chemo, and in Australia, it was 2.3%. That's not saying that they have a 2.3% 5-year survival rate. It's just saying that the people that lived that long, only about 2% of them lived that long because of the chemo. That was what this study said. Chemo doesn't cure. As Brian just mentioned, it's your body that does the healing. It's your immune system that does the healing. We provide the nutrients, we provide the proper fuel to your body. It does the healing. Your body does the curing. The power to heal is yours. When it comes to breast cancer, DCIS, a lot of women that have DCIS, ductal carcinoma in situ, they don't even have cancer. No. But they start on chemotherapy and they get cancer from the chemo a lot of times. Chemotherapy, if you look at tamoxifen, right? It's probably still the most popular drug that's prescribed for breast cancer. It says on the package insert that it might cause secondary cancers. I think it's ovarian and uterine cancer, but I'm not certain. But it's 2 other types of cancer that it can cause. The World Health Organization declared it to be a known carcinogen in 1996, but we treat breast cancer with something that causes cancer. The whole paradigm just has to shift.
So what exactly would you do if someone injected you tomorrow with a vial of cancer and you suddenly had stage 3 cancer and you had the financial resources and the time and you could do anything you want and your only interest was to regain your health? What would be the steps or the actions that you personally, based on all your knowledge, what would you exactly do?
First thing we do is our medical team would do biofilm testing to see what parts of my body were affected. I would then determine with our whole team which type of supplementation that we would target to it. We're using a rare form of advanced vitamin D out of Europe now that people can self-inject. Also, I would be telling myself to do hyperthermia even more than I do daily. 365 days a year, I'm in a sauna, as I was this morning, as I'll be tomorrow morning. And the work is overwhelming on hyperthermia. And you can do it in a sauna. You don't have to go and get, anti-convulsion medicine and heat it up. Why we know that? One of my colleagues did the work here under the NIH back 25 years ago. and said, sure, you can heat the body up 6 degrees 1 day a week, but you can also get into a sauna with cancer an hour or more a day, 7 days a week, and get more benefit from that one. I would also eat like a saint. Why this food works: cooked food kills the phytochemicals. The phytochemicals are completely, absolutely alive in these organic plants that we use. Look at the brilliant work out of the Linus Pauling Institute by one of our colleagues who's on our online faculty, David Williams. Look at his work. I would also get into see the psychotherapist. As positive as I think I am, there's got to be something that I can resolve. We can keep working. We see major breakthroughs when people come through our advanced psychotherapy departments. And then I would use electromagnetic therapies. Tomorrow, my whole conference is about the future of medicine and energy. And when you start to look at what we have learned over the 40 years that we've been employing this at Hippocrates, I assure you this will be something all physicians will use in the very near future. So I won't be frightened because I've seen what can heal cancer.
You know, we don't have a healthcare system. We have a disease care system. And when you really think about it, who wants to care for their disease? You really want to care for that? No, you want to care for your health. And you need to change your attitude, how you're going to do that. So the first step, if I now got that diagnosis that I have breast cancer or ovarian cancer or liver cancer, whatever I might hear now, is to take a step back and say that I'm not going to rush into treatment. I probably have had this for the last 20 years. So it didn't happen overnight. And even like Ty said, they put fear into you, you're going to die tomorrow unless you do what they say. That's not going to happen. And if it happens, hey, then we go. But then we go.
You won't know anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is that we need to take a step back and look into how many people are in this field. I mean, we're all in this here, in this panel, to give you ideas about how you can treat yourself in a healthy way and in an ethical way. There is, like we said, most research is, whoever paid for the research is going to get the results. So there's a lot of quack in science, unfortunately. And we read all the scientific journal, and we do get a lot out of them. A lot of them come our way. A lot of them prove what we've done practically, theoretically. And that's wonderful when we get those answers, because we kind of have more, not meat on the bone, but we have more vegetables on the bones that we can share with our guests and have more confidence too. Our confidence comes from 63 years of doing it. Not so much us, 48, 45 for me, and I'm a little bit younger than Brian. and you know, we have to have fun. When this diagnosis comes that we have cancer, we need to be surrounded by people that support us. Instead, like Pam said, most our family members will say, oh, whatever you do, you can go to Hippocrates, but first you have to do all the treatments, do all the chemo, do all of that, then you can do whatever you want. And by that time they come to us, they're so broken. They are so broken. Their immune system is so low, their white and red blood count is down to silt. We are worried about them catching infections from somebody who sneezes. That's what's been left after all the treatments. So it's all about healthcare. It's a different deal.
I think if I was diagnosed with cancer, the first thing that I would do is take a deep breath, which I think is what we're all saying, and begin looking at evidence for various options on the table. And I think it's really important, and I talk about this every day, so I'm assuming that I try to follow my own advice in everyday living, so I'm assuming I would probably do that here too. It's really important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and to not try to join a camp. That's what people do in healthcare. People ask me, you know, are you a holistic doctor? Are you a naturopathic doctor? Are you this, you that? I'm an evidence-based practitioner. And I don't like the labels because there are good things to be pulled from all branches of medicine. And when you're trying to pick a camp to be in, you ignore the goodness that can be taken from other branches. So I think what I would do is start by looking into all of the options to see what are the options and what is the benefit and what are the risks of all of them. And I just wrote an article on this topic not too long ago, that if you look at the medical research and you look at data on survivors, Kelly Turner wrote a great book, Radical Remission, that documented the success, how 1,000 cancer patients stayed alive. If you look at what these people have all done, they've used a lot of different approaches. And in many instances, it's approaches borrowed from many forms of medicine. So chemotherapy isn't all bad, like Ty said. Sometimes you have to shrink something to get clear margins to take it out. And by the way, surgery is not all bad. Since 1850, we've been taking contained tumors out. By the way, the magic 1850 is because we had sterile operating rooms and anesthesia, which were the two things you need to be able to do that. So we have over 150 years of taking localized cancers out with pretty good results, and sometimes you have to shrink it before you can do it. At the same time, you can't ignore nutrition. You can't ignore the psychological aspects. So I think that my treatment plan would be a result of taking things from a number of different branches of medicine, the combination of which would make sense to me, and then starting. So if I were diagnosed today, I probably wouldn't be doing anything until maybe the end of March. Or beginning to end of March. Sometime in March, I would be starting whatever I was doing, in addition to eating well, like really clean eating. I'm a pretty clean eater now, but I would probably, disavow anything not good for me at that point. So that's what I would do, and I think that leads to the best outcome. Because and one thing I'll say too, I think that patients have to have a lot of confidence in what they're doing, because I've actually seen patients decide to do something that doesn't have a very high efficacy rate and that I wouldn't do, and it came out great because they thought it was going to come out great. I have a good friend who did chemo 30 years ago, and he asked me, I said, well, I wouldn't do it, but he felt like he should. Still alive today. And a lot of that, in my opinion, is because he wanted to live, he intended to live, he thought this would cause him to live, and sometimes that brings it about. And I'm not talking about wishing your health to get better, but I do think that psychological component in terms of confidence in your treatment is important.
It's a really tough question because to be honest, I don't know what I would do. I think the first thing I would do is take a huge deep breath, as you said. I'm going to kind of answer the question in a roundabout way. First of all, it's so many different types of cancer, and gosh, give me a type and I'll answer it and I'll figure it out. But even then, I think most importantly, though, I'm going to kind of speak because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physician, I'm an artist and a journalist and a filmmaker, but I have met a lot of cancer patients in my time, and I've had members of the family that have been hit with it as well, both before I knew what I knew and after. But I think when you get hit, I think you said it best, Pam, right?
Yes.
Is that I've seen consistently is that people that try to have a good attitude about it are the fighters, the ones that are really willing to stand up to this thing and go the extra mile, or generally just the attitude alone. They tend to do better than the ones that are kind of cynical at heart. Oh, the world's against me. They're just kind of they're not the fighter type. And honestly, it's really strange. I've noticed, this is maybe a little too abstract, but on the diagnosis side, so often I've found that there's also a similar personality type, but I don't want to get too far down this road. But so you have the ability and willingness to fight, first of all. And then secondly, there's not really any one route. It's a kind of a moving target at all times, and it's a marathon, especially if it's a really intense big one, it's all over the body. You're talking about a marathon. I have a family member that got hit with this pretty bad case, female, I'll say. I don't want to give her up right now, but it was bad. And even Brzezinski took a look and went, oof, oh my God. She's going to have, before I can go near this, she's going to have to go through traditional, as you said earlier, you got to get this down to some manageable sizes before we can even think about going in here. So, she went through the chemo route, she went through the surgery route, But it's also learning how to be the boss. You're the patient, you're the boss. So if you're a contractor hiring somebody to build your house, you may not know how to lay bricks, you may not know how to build a pool, but you're still the boss. You're the one calling the shots. Those oncologists work for you. You're not working for them. So going back to the fear factor that kind of sets in, you just got to remember that and take charge. And again, I know it's kind of a challenging thing. You're like, this is a brand new thing. And if you're not like one of us that are kind of familiar with this, it's a scary thing to navigate. So that being said, like with this one person, this person was told, oh, you're going to get a colostomy bag. You're not going to, surgery, We're like, nope, no, you're not. So what I'm saying is we managed to navigate this system and go through other ways and rearrange some of the things they wanted to do and make our own decisions. And we took the reins, and this person is now tumor-free, I would not say cure, from one of the most ovarian cancer, devastating, 98% recurrence rate. This person probably shouldn't be alive today, to be honest. But we did traditional, coming from Eric, the guy that made Brzezinski. They went the traditional route, surgery, radiation, but then we found a really cool oncologist, mainstream, that was willing to be open-minded, willing to listen to us, and we did a series of immunotherapies, and we also did some gene-targeted therapy. And I think it's the irony, it's not lost on me, and the man that basically wrote the book on cancer as a metabolic disease, there's a kind of a dogmatic fight, there are people that believe in the metabolic, and there's a lot of truth. People that believe in the genetic, maybe a lot of truth. I don't know, I don't pretend to know, I'm not an expert. I think it's important to be open-minded and look at it all and not have any dogmatic viewpoints. But so what we did is had her biopsies tested because of my experience with Brzezinski and the genetic side. So one thing I would say, again, we could probably have a separate talk about why maybe this is a good idea, maybe why it has a direct relationship to metabolism, having nothing to do with genes. That's not really as important, is that you are capable, and we can comment on that if you want, but we are capable of getting our biopsies tested for the supposedly alleged genetic mutation that may or may not be involved with it. And there are drugs, including the chemotherapeutic drugs, that aren't even gene-targeted, quote unquote, may not even be a cancer medication, that have been known in clinical trial data to allegedly affect these genes. So that's what we're doing now. We got through the hideousness of the surgery and radiation pretty clean, considering no long-lasting side effects that we're noticing, and some really progressive immunotherapy. And of course, obviously, the lifestyle changes, that's all a given, and some gene-targeted therapy. So this person hasn't been on any traditional medication, like when I mean traditional chemo or radiation, in 2 years. And sure enough, our recurrence hit, 98% recurrence rate anyway, but rarely does anyone get tumor-free a second time after stage 4 ovarian. She's tumor-free a second time. So that's kind of where we're at. So my point of telling this whole long story is, it's so different. And I think it's important not to be put in this box, and remember that, because it's often you get hit with the disease and the oncologist says, oh, you got page 396, you get this. They treat you like a number, and that's what everybody here is trying to tell you, that it's not so easy. It's hard to answer. It's a good question, Steve, but it's just so hard to answer because I don't know what I'd do. All I can do is kind of tell you what I've seen others do. But be prepared for a marathon, and be prepared for the fight if this hits you or a loved one. And don't just, as Pam said, and as everybody said, don't take the first advice you hear. Take a breath. Just look around. Try to navigate the system. You are in charge, not that oncologist. So you have a brain also that can do their own research as well. So.
Well, yeah, this is an interesting question. People always ask me, what are you going to do if you get cancer? Well, I know what I need to do. And a lot of what was said here is absolutely spot on. It's you have to know, you have to have a tool. If you know the tool, if you know what's driving the disease, then you know how to manage the disease. Let me tell you. The mitochondria in cancer is screwed up. What that means is they have to ferment. There's only 2 fuels in the body that can supply the energy for the growing tumor cell, and that is glucose and glutamine. Now, it sounds simple. It's easy to target glucose. It's not so easy to target glutamine, for what Brian said. The immune system uses glutamine. So if you're going to target glutamine, you've got to be very careful about harming your own immune system. The other issue is that all metastatic cancers, or the majority of them, are the immune system. People in the scientific field are grappling with this, which means that our own immune system is the metastatic cancer cell. They use glutamine, okay? And our normal immune system uses glutamine. So how are we going to kill this guy if the very cells we need to get rid of them are also using the same fuel? There's no question about what Brian said. You have to kill the cell strategically without harming the normal cells of the body. So what we have is you have a strategy. You know what the cells are eating, because without energy, nothing lives. So we take the energy away from the growing tumor cell, transition the body over to a fuel that the tumor cells generally can't use, which are ketone bodies, and then we strategically go after the glutamine, but we pulse and press. So we actually, and I don't know of a diet yet that can target glutamine. There's many diets that can target glucose, but glutamine you have to be very careful about. So and this is cutting edge now, we're even thinking about adding glutamine back, the very fuel that the tumor cell needs to use after we use certain kinds of low-dose drugs to hammer the tumor cells and slowly degrade them. I agree with what everybody said here. Going to the Hippocrates Health Institute and using these combinatorial therapies while maintaining the health of the body seems to be a very logical way to do this. One of the things that I would not do, ever, is take chemo. Because what is the purpose of chemo? It's to kill proliferating cancer cells, right? This is why they do it. They do use radiation. Why? To kill proliferating cancer cells. But if you pull the plug on their energy, they're going to die. They're going to die just as if you were to use chemo. So why use chemo when you can pull the plug on their energy? The problem is, the biggest problem is that the medical community doesn't know about this. I feel bad. The physicians that I speak to, the oncologists, are always shocked when you tell them this because they never heard of it. They're not trained in medical school to. These people are not bad people. These are good people. They're trying to help their patients. The problem is they just simply don't understand the biology of the disease they're treating. This is sad. And nutrition does play a massive role. So when someone says, oh, nutrition, go home and eat whatever you want, that's misinformation. That's not accurate information. It's a combinatorial issue. It's a body disease. You have to maintain the health of your body while you strategically eliminate the tumor cells. And you can do this. And we're on the cutting edge of doing this, but I'm not going to say that we have a blueprint that works. The only thing I can say is that we've looked at every kind of a cancer, and they're all the same. There's not breast cancer, brain cancer, bladder cancer, colon cancer, they're all the same. They're all fermenters. They're all the same, because we know that. Okay? We've done this. We've looked at this, so we know what their vulnerability is. What we have not yet done is we have not yet perfected dosage, timing, and scheduling. And I think what Hippocrates does and other institutes like this, and there is going to be more, by the way, because we're working on clinics that want to target and kill cancer cells without toxicity to the rest of the body based on an understanding of what the fundamental issue of the disease actually is. And it's very rarely going to involve radiation and chemo. And another thing about the immunotherapies that you hear about, that you hear on TV every night, you don't see the papers that show that this stuff is also can kill you very quickly. There's a paper that just came out in JAMA. You get hyper-progressive disease from some of these. And you know, it's very strange because people think, well, I'm going to go in for an immunotherapy. And you know, Steve Allen from Microsoft passed away very recently, died in 2 weeks after starting the treatment. Blake Nordstrom of the Nordstrom department store, physicians very optimistic, dead in 2 weeks after starting these treatments. So let me tell you, no one dies in 2 weeks from metabolic therapy, I can tell you that.
Before we go on, more than 35 years ago, we determined that sugar was feeding cancer, not because we had a brain trust of researchers at Hippocrates, but the forms of cancer that were visible to us when people were consuming large amounts of fruit were growing. And so we did a little test, and we took away all the fruit and saw it remiss in about 18 cases. So we wiped fruit out of the diet, initially for cancer, then eventually for other diseases. And so we had been doing this for many decades. And a few years ago, we had a major medical conference, a research conference, and Thomas came, and he sat down with me, and he said, "Why do you do that?" I said, "Because it helps cancer." He says, "Do you want me to show you why that works?" And remember, we sat at the table, and he showed me on a paper exactly how fruit sugar feeds cancer more than any other form of sugar, because it metabolizes in the body like a fat. No other sugar metabolizes like a fat. It actually makes you fat. So what an eye-opener for the man I admire the most. Probably in history, there's been nobody who knows more about cancer than Thomas. So give him another hand.
And I want to follow up all of these. I'm really impressed with all the answers. And following up Dr. Seyfried and then Brian, I'm going to be a lot less technical because I don't want you to be able to compare. But I'm going to make it a little more simple. What I would do is this. And Stephen prefaced the question, if somebody injected you with a cancer virus, what would you do? Right? Well, they tried to do that. If you remember back in the early 60s, it was in New Orleans, right before Kennedy was assassinated. Alton Oshner, who was head of one of the American Cancer Somethings, had Dr. Mary Sherman working for him, and they were trying to weaponize cancer through the form of a virus that they could then kill Castro with. She then was killed, and it's been put into a book called Dr. Mary's Monkey. I don't know if you've ever read that, but if you haven't, it's worth reading. But it's all about the terrain. So if I were injected with a cancer virus, if your internal terrain is healthy, then it'll fight the virus. And I'm not saying that cancer is a virus. I'm just using that analogy. I mean, it's the same reason that, Anne-Marie's mentioned that some people in their clinic get so sick from the treatments that just you don't want to sneeze on them because their immune system's so compromised, right? It's all about the terrain. It's about the immune system. It's about your internal terrain. That's why, during, quote, flu season, and everybody's getting the flu largely from the vaccine, and they go to school, and there's a school class with 30 kids, and 15 of them get sick and the others don't. Why is that? The flu virus isn't any different that they were exposed to. 15 of them had an immune system that fought it off. Their internal terrain was healthier. And by the way, the Flulavol vaccine, one of the most popular flu vaccines, Flulavol, it says on the package insert, has not been shown to prevent the flu, by the way. So we should start reading package inserts. Okay, it has not been shown to prevent the flu. But it's really just about keeping your internal terrain healthy. And one of the things that Pam said was, let's not try to categorize treatments. In Asia, we just went to Asia, they don't think of it as, I'm going to use one traditional treatment, one homeopathic, one naturopathic, and then one Ayurvedic. They say, let's figure out what works for the patient. Exactly. And they use it. They don't compartmentalize the medicines. As a matter of fact, countries like Japan and the Philippines and Taiwan, and I believe Malaysia, have laws in place that say doctors can use anything that they deem as efficacious for their patient. Very different than here. Very different. And I believe in India, in India, homeopathy is officially recognized as a treatment by the Indian government. You can go to their oncological wards and get chemo if you want. You can also get homeopathy. So they don't think of it as in these boxes or in these categories. It's just what works for the patient. And another thing that I think it was Pam who mentioned, it's the mental state, all right? It's the belief. I just interviewed over 60 doctors in these Asian countries. Almost every one of them said the power of belief is so important. We can't stress that enough. And many people have been healed by treatments that shouldn't have worked, but they believed that they did, and they healed them. So it's really important to believe, and that's why Especially in India, we found that the doctors there, when someone's diagnosed with cancer, they call their whole family in. And they meet with their whole family for hours to get their story of their family, the story of their life, to get the support of their family, to find out what emotional issues might be causing this cancer, and to get the support so that the patient can then proceed on the treatment with the belief that it's going to work. It's so important. We can't overemphasize the importance of believing that it's going to work.
I apologize for badgering you, but the question, I guess, that I believe most people would like to know the most, even though there's amazing things to ask you, and even though there's a lot of interesting things we could talk about, but again, if someone has third stage cancer and they don't want a pep talk, they want to know exactly what tomorrow, assume you have, in 5, you have to decide immediately, what is the plan? Are you going to do water fasting? Are you going to do anti-neoplasms? Are you going to take saunas every day? Are you going to be doing raw green juices? Should you walk barefoot on the grass 6 hours a day? Should you stop using cell phones? Should you get sunshine? Should you take certain supplements? In other words, assume they don't want a theoretical discussion, they don't want a pep talk, they want to know exactly, name the 10 steps of what you believe are the most effective, powerful ways to deal with this. Even though I know you'd like to be more general and say each case is different, but if that wasn't an option and they want to know, are you saying go to Brzezinski and get an anti-neoplasms, go get fetal stem cell therapy, go on a fast, a water fast, do green juicing every day, do saunas every day, walk barefoot, do pulse therapy. In other words, exactly what is the plan. There are people in this audience that I know who have cancer and they are advanced, and I guess they have to make their own decisions, but if you were trying to give, whatever you're allowed to say, what is the most specific information you believe, based on everything you know about diet and lifestyle, would be your specific advice of exactly what you would tell them to do tomorrow, step by step?
So why at Hippocrates we offer 88 different treatments is to answer the question you've just given me. So we have our medical doctor and our nursing team and our nutritional team evaluate every patient. When somebody comes in, they do an extensive medical blood test. They do extensive cyber scan from Germany. They do extensive BioWell from Russia. And then when we sit with you, we don't have to say, go to Dr. Jones there or go to Dr. Smith here. We say, go to this department, go to that department. Now here are the commonalities. Everyone has to see somebody who works with people facing cancer. If you don't go to a psychotherapist that knows how to do that work, it may not work for you. So that's what we have at Hippocrates. Number 2, everyone has to eat a pristine, clean diet that contain the phytochemicals in it that have been proven overwhelmingly to fight off and even reverse every form of cancer. Yes, we would use electromagnetic pulse therapies, laser therapies, cyber scan therapies, etc. But that is determined which one we would use in which case with which person. Yes, we would tell you to get IVs and do hyperbaric treatment at our medical department. All of these things would be taken into account. Supplementation would be determined upon which type of cancer you have and what state of health you're in. Can we tell somebody who's emaciated, you should exercise? No, but how about if you're fairly active? Movement, oxygen therapies of some type. And so I think it's a very difficult thing for anyone who's legitimate to say, here's exactly what I'd say to every person. I've given you the basic things everyone should do, but then there may be other things that we would add on top of that.
Get rid of the numbers. There is number 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And that is purely for medical treatments to be done. Cancer is cancer. And a lot of people are surprised that cancer is found in the lymph, and like sentinel nodes, especially for breast cancer. And You should never let anybody take your lymph nodes out. That is your filter system. That's how you get toxins out and waste out. We've seen horrendous side effects of legs being double the size, arms being double the size because the poor lymph system cannot clean. So we need to know that numbers are just numbers. And the fear, like you said, the fear that comes in when you hear, well, you're stage 3 or you're stage 4, and I mean, that's like doomsdays. It's just for medical treatment. You have to realize that. Yes, cancer spreads, but that's the way it wants to outsmart you. That's how it works. It works through the lymph system. That's how it spreads. It's like, that's their arms. And because they're smart, they want to be in other places. They don't want you to be able to kill it. So you have to realize that it's a huge machine, and the fear is the biggest problem, because you are going to go right down with that fear. And realize that every cell in your body knows what you're thinking. So the first thing you would do, for example, now we have an amazing special cancer program with Dr. Jan Ranicky. And Brian, you can tell more about how that came about. It's really, it changes people's minds and their health big time.
Back in 1960s, there was a conservative oncologist from Texas called Dr. Symington. And Dr. Symington was a very honest man. He would go out to his nurse and say, is John here? Oh no, John has passed on. Is Mary here? Mary passed. So he concluded, as an oncologist, that what he was doing seemingly wasn't working. That people weren't showing up because he had died from the treatments he had given. So the one thing he noticed, because he was sort of a conscious guy, that the very childlike optimistic patients that went to 23 doctors and all of them said, you're going to die, you're sick, and they said, no, I'm not going to die, I'm going to be perfectly fine, either lived a whole lot longer, in some rare cases reversed their disease. So he left medicine. What a courage he had. And he basically said, I'm only going to work with visualization. I'm going to try to teach people to be optimistic with this. And boy, was he ridiculed. Thank God, before his death a few years ago, the American Cancer Society gave him an award, a lifetime award. But boy, he was railroaded out of the country. Most of the work he basically did was in Asia. And his partner, who worked with him for over 30 years, Dr. Jan Ranicky, has been working with Anna Marie and I for about 10 years. So I said a couple of years ago, why don't we create a specific program called the Advanced Comprehensive Cancer Program. So beside the 88 other things that I just mentioned we do, we basically have every 3 weeks Dr. Jan come in, and she works extensively. Now, she brought technologies in called NewCom. Physicists at Harvard put this together, that put you in alpha states and activate the immune system. And as Anna Maria so wisely just said, every cell, 100 trillion cells in your body know what you're thinking. That's not a joke or an exaggeration or new age. The data and science is out on all of this. And basically, the reverse happens. So if you get people into a very deep state of relaxation, and they stop the fear factor, the fight and flight where you're in the reptilian brain, your immune system now becomes proactive and starts to fight the disease. And this is the work we're doing in coordination with Harvard at this point to see what happens when we put people into these deep states. So it's another option that we have. So everyone gets psychotherapy. If you come to us healthy as can be and just want to remain sexy, or if you're trying to fight for your life, but this is more advanced specifically for cancer, because that's been her expertise for over 35 years now.
I really understand the spirit of Steve's question, and I wish that I could say, here are 10 things, specific things. But as I mentioned this afternoon when I was talking, medicine has tried to purge clinical judgment from practice, where we do one size fits all. You have cancer, you come to me, we do these things. You have high cholesterol, you take this drug. And so I think it's even more important with the cancer patient to not do that, because everybody is different. Their financial resources are different. Their risk taking behavior or thoughts are different. And all of that has to be taken into consideration. And I'll give you just one example of how this plays out in real life. So going back to Kelly Turner's book, Radical Remission, she identified 74 strategies that cancer patients use to survive when they're terminal. And all 1,000 of them who didn't know each other were doing the same 9. And that's what she wrote her book about. And the first chapter was about diet. They all adopted a plant-based diet. However, they had all different versions of the plant-based diet. And one patient that stands out in my mind is a kidney cancer patient who was supposed to die. In fact, he was in the hospital getting chemotherapy. He had stage 4 kidney cancer. And it smelled so bad in the hospital, he went up to the roof to get fresh air, and he was a very prominent businessman in Japan. And so they thought he was going to kill himself, so they sent him home to die, because they didn't want him to kill himself at the hospital. It would be bad, a lot of bad detention for that. That's having your heart in the right place, right? We don't care. We just don't want this guy to kill himself, and we get, some bad publicity. So he went home, and he felt better. People feel better at home. And he started thinking he'd like to live. And so the first thing he did is start drinking clean water, and then he started eating better. And he started down the path of dietary perfection and said, no, you know what? I think the reason I got this cancer is that I do everything to extremes. I work too hard. So he said, I decided I'm still going to drink coffee. I'm not going to try to be perfect at this diet because my particular problem is perfection. So doing more perfection is not a treatment plan for a person who's dying of perfection, right? So, and that's just one story, but I think that the continuing theme through this book, and it's very instructive because she's the first person to my knowledge who's ever done a study of terminal cancer patients who survived to quantify what they did, which I think quantifying is always a good idea, right? And what you hear in these stories is that everybody's situation was different. People have children, they don't have kids. They've got money to travel, they don't have money to travel. They have parents who will have them move in or not. And so you have all this going on. And so I think the most important thing is basically to say to the cancer patient, there is no agenda. We don't have a list. So what we're going to do is we're going to start figuring out who you are and what's going on and what has gone on and what your resources are and what your risk-taking predisposition is. And I can tell you, I'm a risk taker. So for me to say, I'm not getting traditional treatment, I'm going to jump off the cliff and go fast and do this and that, that might be my list, and somebody else might be horrified. I'm afraid to fast, I'm afraid to travel, I don't have the money to travel. I mean, so again, I think the most important thing, if I had to make a list of things you do with cancer patients, step 1, start listening. That's the most important thing. What happened to you? Tell me that. Step 2, tell me about your life. What are we working with here? What are you considering? What do you think about some of these things? And that's the place to start. And then it just takes you where it takes you. And sometimes, I used to be a sales trainer before I was in healthcare. And everybody wanted me to give them a script that would help them sell things. And I said, there's no script for selling things. You listen to people and you respond to what they say, right? I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with you guys. Did I sound like I was reading from a script? No, I hear what you say, and then I have something to say. So I think that's the way we help a cancer patient. There's no script, there's no list, there's no agenda. Who are you? What happened to you? What's going on in your life? What are our possibilities? How do you make decisions about things? And a lot of times I just start with, tell me how I can be of service to you. What is it that I can do to make you more comfortable and to help you through this process? And then it just goes where it goes. Yeah,
Well, I'm going to try to answer Stephen's question directly.
Well, I think you probably will do better than me.
Okay, so how do you know you have cancer in the first place? Bleeding, pain, swelling, some lump, a sore that doesn't heal. There's a lot of manifestations. Everybody may have a different manifestation in some organ, stomach, liver, different colon, breast, whatever. So you get, you have someone tell you, looks like something's going on here. Okay, what does it look like? Well, there's some image. Something's amiss. Oh, look at the scan. One thing I will never do is have them take a biopsy, because there's enough evidence in the literature to show that you run a high risk. It's like putting a stick in a beehive, the bees come out. I'm telling you, there's papers in the literature that support what I'm saying. I can share them with everybody. So I don't do biopsies. So, okay, we do non-invasive evaluation. The diagnosis comes, yeah, there's something there. You're coughing blood. Yeah, there's a spot on your lung. Blood in the stool. Yeah, we looked and there's some sort of a lesion on your colon. Okay, take the blood work first. Okay, you're in there. Okay, run me a blood. Let me see every lipid, every protein, everything that I'm looking at, because I use those as biomarkers. First thing I would do is I would scan my lipid biomarkers. What's my triglycerides? What's my LDL to HDL ratio? What are my electrolytes? I would look at those, and we would talk about it with a physician that would know what's the healthy ranges and where you're at a little bit. What's your vitamin D levels? What's your creatine? What's your ferritin? What are all the markers? So you look at the markers. So you know where your body is at the time you are diagnosed. Because many people are pretty healthy when they get their first diagnosis. They don't look like death warmed over. Not everybody, but a lot of people say, gee, I didn't know I had cancer. It's only after the treatment you look like you're dead. So the first thing you do is you get all your markers. Okay, you got all your blood work. You make the decision. You use, there's no question about stress. As a matter of fact, the diagnosis raises blood sugar. Stress raises blood sugar, feeds the tumor. Absolutely, you don't have lymph nodes removed because you need those. You need the parts of your body that are healthy. You don't want to be ripping out things that you're going to need to facilitate the resolution. Radical change in diet, there's absolutely no question about it. Whatever you're eating, got to change. Okay, so the first thing I will do is get myself into therapeutic ketosis, because we know we're going to shrink those guys down, and we're going to make the margins really sharp. We know this. We've done it. I have preclinical evidence I can show you tomorrow. So what you do is you shrink the thing down, but you got to keep your body healthy. So what do you get? Wow, therapeutic ketosis. That's like walking on hot rocks. Okay, you are in charge of your own health. You have to know that it's going to require some part of your, you just can't turn your soul over to someone who is clueless on the biology of the disease. You have to know to yourself that, okay, it's going to require some participation on my part. What does that mean? I've done water-only fasting. It's a bitch. It's always easier to tell somebody to do it than do it yourself. It's not easy, but I've learned from my friends that if we use the diet that will bring us into therapeutic ketosis, which means you have very low blood sugars and your ketone elevations, the tumors go into a kind of a dormant state, and they start shrinking up. How long you can keep them in that state depends on how long you can maintain therapeutic ketosis. And there are diet ways, there are a lot of different ways that you can maintain that. If you go to the Hippocrates Health Institute, if I were to go, I might, it depends on what I would have. I would have my own glucose ketone meter, and I would know every day where I stand with respect to my therapeutic ketosis. Amazon, $38, get the strips. That's a very powerful tool to tell me that I am in therapeutic ketosis. When I'm in therapeutic ketosis, I know for a fact those tumor cells are not going to be growing. They're going to be dormant. Now, they're not all going to die, because I told you the glutamine issue. And one of the things that Brzezinski uses is anti-neoplastons, which actually are targeting glutamine. There's a lot of ways you can go after that. I would have to look at my list of drugs that I know that would be able to work together under the condition of therapeutic ketosis, and this is what I would do. And I would battle the disease day in and day out. I might consider not going to work for a while. Yes. Stress is not good. People say, well, I'm under chemotherapy and I'm working every day. Listen, you put yourself at risk. Yeah. That's all. You put yourself at risk. So you want to get your body back into a homeostatic state again. And I agree, these cancers just don't turn around in 3 days. I mean, you've had these things for a long time. So you can get rid of them in time. It's just like you put on weight. All of a sudden, you put on a lot of weight. Gee, wait, well, it didn't happen overnight. You're wearing 150 pounds on Tuesday and 400 pounds on Wednesday. So the weight comes off gradually, the cancer goes away gradually. And you just bring your body into a new, healthy state. You don't go into this radical, let's cut it out right away. Let's nuke and poison you right away. No. You have a lot of chances to think very carefully about all your options, knowing how to do this. And this is what I would do. And if I were to go down, I would be going down on my terms.
You got it. Hold on, fighting.
Eric, you want me to go first?
You go right ahead.
I'm just going to be very generic here. So there's certain cancers. I'll be specific. If it were me diagnosed, certain cancers, if it was a fast-growing brain tumor or whatever, there's certain situations where you want to get it surgically removed. Pressing on the optic nerve, whatever. I mean, there's certain situations, but that's not the generic terms that I'm going to be talking about now. Just a typical cancer. What I'm going to do. Cancer is a result of a nutritional deficiency coupled with being overly toxic. That's it. Generally speaking, you haven't been eating right and your body's toxic. So I'd start eating better and try to detoxify. What does that mean? Dr. Seyfried's right, I'd try to get into therapeutic ketosis. Great way to starve the cancer cells. That would be the meat and potatoes of what well, no, not meat and potatoes. No. That would be that would be the sprouts and the quinoa. Okay. Now, if you don't want to eat meat, you can. I visited clinics in Bangkok and in Phuket, Thailand, where they put their patients into therapeutic ketosis with an organic, raw, vegan, ketogenic diet. So it doesn't have to include meat. You can do ketogenic without eating meat. But I'd get into ketosis. I drink plenty of clean water. What kind of water? I'm not going to get into specifics. We're going to start an argument here, but clean water the best you can. Hydrate yourself, get good nutrition, get plenty of herbs and spices, and get your body into ketosis. The detoxification part, sweat every day. How many people don't sweat every day? In the wintertime, okay, Brian said he sits in a sauna every day. I do too. 45 minutes in the sauna, I sweat like a pig. You got to detoxify through sweating. That's one way you can do it. Another way that you can detoxify is through your lymphatic system moving. You've got a rebounder, very simple, little mini trampoline, jump on it 20 minutes a day. There's not an exercise in the world that stimulates your lymphatic system better than a rebounder. So that's detoxifying. And then the emotional detoxification as well. Forgive, love, try to not carry emotional baggage, try to not be angry with people and you're always stewing and mad. It sounds easy, sometimes it's not as easy to get there, but that's what you need emotionally to detoxify. That's what I would focus on to start with.
Again, it's really tough. To be honest, like, no one's ever actually asked me that question. It's like, you can ask me what I would do, and you're asking me, like, what advice I would give. The advice part is tough because, like, talk about what Thomas is talking about. Half people out there have never even heard of ketosis, and you try to explain what it means, trying to convince someone to change their lifestyle so drastically that doesn't want to do it is really hard. So it's like there's so many personality barriers that go along with this. But honestly, I think if I was diagnosed tomorrow, I'd probably take exactly what as Thomas said, because you're in control. You don't have to rely on some guy to wait for the appointment and and I've studied the science as well. Because I'm as a journalist, I've looked at the genetic side, and I've looked at what the kind of work that he's been doing, and I'm just, as an open-minded person, just wanting to absorb all information as just being someone that just wants to take it all in. There's, I think, as you said, one of the key ingredients in anti-neoplastons, I think it's called phenylacetylglutamine. How coincidental, right? So, yeah, I think that's what I would do. I think if I was hit, and he's right, it's as you gain weight and lose weight, it's very gradual. Those tumors, they didn't just pop up yesterday, and why not take that approach? That's not going to cost you much. It's just going to take some commitment to willing to make that lifestyle change. And if it doesn't work, then you go from there. But that's the best I can tell you, Steve. Giving advice is hard because you're talking about a personality that might be really stubborn and not like what you're telling them. But for me, yeah, I'd go with Thomas.
And I just want to jump in real quick for those of you that don't know what therapeutic ketosis is, sounds too complicated. We can simplify it even more than that. And this is not getting you into therapeutic ketosis, but if your diet comes, if what you're eating comes in a box, a bag, or is wrapped, don't eat it. Eat things that grow, eat things that are organic, and if it's potatoes and they're organic and you like them, eat them. If it's sprouts and they're organic and you like them, eat them. If it's tomatoes, eat them. If it's radishes, fine, eat it. Peppers, eat it. If it grows, it's real food, eat it. And that literally, raise your hand if you've had something today that was packaged. Even in here, I guarantee we've got a lot of people that have eaten packaged food. Just eat real food. And don't worry about ketosis or anything. Just from a simple perspective, start eating real food. A lot of people's health will turn around. I real quick, sorry, Steve. Interviewed a lady in one of the Asian countries that I went to. She had breast cancer. She was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer. They had to get her into chemotherapy, but they had to do some things first before they could get her in. It was like 30 days before they could get her started. In the meantime, all she did was started juicing and eating organic raw food. 30 days later, she went back for her scan and her breast tumors were gone.
Oh, sure.
Before I forget, there's two films that I hope all of you listening around the world and in the room will see. One is on YouTube called Dominion.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen this yet, I'd strongly advise you see it, Dominion. And the second is Fasting. I know that it's on Amazon Prime, but probably other places. And that will sort of explain two areas that will better inform you about the short conversations we're having here.
I'm gonna say one more thing that just for fun, like the whole issue of ketosis, it was partly my wife and I reading some of your work. We decided to go into ketosis just for the hell of it. Seriously, like
For a weekend?
No. Well, we did as long as we could. But I mean, I'm not saying this is advice, but I also often say like they should almost give like a semester course in college on cancer, really, to every human being. It should be a requirement because, like, as a male, me in America, I got like a 50% chance of getting it. Women are like a 1 in 3% chance. And then when you're hit with it, you have this huge learning curve you're dealing with. But I kind of just want to say off the shooting from the hip, try ketosis. Give it a shot. Learn what it is. Put yourself into ketosis just for the hell of it. And in a way, in some bizarre kind of abstract way, you know what it's like. You know how you got there. And maybe in some weird way, you know that you may have pushed back something that might be growing. I'm just saying. It's a pretty remarkable state to be in. Kind of like, I don't want to get off a tangent, but like what I was saying in my talk, you heard me about my stem cell experience and the kind of what it did for me psychologically. Ketosis was similar. It's fascinating how it worked with my brain function. It was just like this heightened productive state that it's hard to explain. It's a wonderful thing to experiment with and understand what it feels like. So.
You're going to give us another zinger?
Well, so what if someone has cancer, what are the non-negotiables that immediately, before you even do anything, we're saying in terms of diet? Are you saying that you never eat sugar in any form, no matter what, that you do not eat an apple, you never consider blueberries, you do not have carrots? Like, to what, are you saying that sugar is an absolute non-negotiable, that if you have it, it's a never ever? So that's the first question. And then, are you saying that you don't eat cooked food, that your beans and grains should only be raw and sprouted because cooked beans and grains have sugar in them? Are you saying, so as far as diet, an hour, 10 minutes after you find out you have cancer, what in your mind is non-negotiable regarding diet? If you got third stage cancer, you don't want to mess around, in your mind, what is the non-negotiable in terms of diet that a cancer patient would absolutely need to be on? And I understand that this is not a fair question because some people don't want, no matter what, they don't want to take the most extreme approach. But for this person who is saying, I will do anything to heal, what is the non-negotiable diet that 1 minute after you find out you should be eating for the next year of your life?
Well, it's an easy answer for us because we have a program that we watched work and with a broad mind constantly learning and bringing things in from our global travels and studies. But no question you have to give up all sugar. Either direct sugar, which would be everything from maple syrup to honey to agave syrup, the worst agave syrup, by the way. The list goes on. Xylitol, excuse me. Number two, you're exactly right, that grains break down to sugar, so it's sort of a closet case that would bring about a sugar condition anyway. So that's going to create a problem. Now, as far as raw, there's no question if you read the literature and read the real science, not the fluffy stuff that most of the alternative doctors read, but the deep stuff on phytochemicals and phytonutrients. These are the way that you cut blood flow off to cancer tumors. I've written 3 scientific books called Food is Medicine that I offer at conferences where mainstream doctors are mocking what we talk about. And the funniest story was I was up in Boston and a doctor was saying, well, how do you know that's true? And I said, because the research was done on the same floor you work on. So I'd strongly suggest that you get up off your butt and go down and meet this particular doctor I just introduced to you in this conference. So when you look at raw food, it's the food that all of the 8 million other species on Earth eat. The only species on the planet Earth that happen to choose to cook our food are humans. Think about that alone. You say, well, my dog eats cooked food. Would your dog eat cooked food if he was in nature? He's a carnivore. He'd be eating meat, and he wouldn't even eat it. He'd kill it rotten and then eat the organs of the meat. And so we have been observing in clinical settings for 63 years the sickest people in the world on a raw food diet. Would I also say that you better stop using cell phones, standing in front of a computer? Whoever wisely said maybe you should take off a few days, Anna Maria's mantra to everyone who's sick. And as you said, everyone has different socioeconomic problems, and it's a shame in this country, at least, in the United States, you can't ask for time off. You may lose your job even if you're facing death. But in civilized nations around the world, you can do that and they honor you because they respect you and the work that you're doing. So protect yourself. You know, Anna Maria created with the Germans that Russian and German technology protects you from these type of radioactive problems that all of us are being faced with every day. Shut the router off in your house. Don't sit in front of the computer. Don't sit and gaze at televisions all day long. Look at the evidence about cell towers. Closer proximity, more cancer. That's not anymore a question. Dr. Davis, who sadly can't come, is one of our colleagues. She's the #1 woman in America that speaks about cancer being caused by cell technology. Dr. Hardell, the #1 in the world from Sweden, who Anna Maria's interviewed, basically has been petitioning for over 2 decades the cell industry to protect you. So cell things. How about chemicals? So you say, well, organic food costs more money. Well, you're going to choose to put pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides in? You better drink pure water. How many of you know every drop of water on Earth, I write about this in several of my books, have plastics and pharmaceutical drugs in it? You thought chlorine and fluoride was bad? That's kid stuff compared to pharmaceutical drugs and plastics, and they cause cancer. And so all of these things have to be taken into account. But all of that is null and void if you don't have a purposeful reason to live. Why people fight, as you said, is because they have a purpose to be here. If you don't have that, we may prolong your life and sadly your agony from doing all of this, but the fact is ultimately you will not recover without that purpose.
I think the non-negotiables on diet, I guess I would respectfully have a different opinion about some of these things. It's interesting because we can learn a lot from looking around the world at populations where the cancer incidence is really low, and they're not raw food eaters. Now, if you want to eat raw food, I don't spend a lot of time talking people out of things, but the other side of it is that if cooked food had no nutrient value, the Okinawans would have been gone a long time ago, because about 80% of their diet is cooked food. So I think, again, I want to stay away from dogma. Everybody does this, everybody does that, and I also want to stay away from ideology, which I think is a little bit important too. I feel very strongly, and my opinion might be different than many people, and we are trying to give our opinions here, and you guys have to sort this out. But I think that people have a limited number of things they can pay attention to. And when we use up our compliance genes on things that sometimes make little difference at the expense of things that make a big difference, I think we lose people. And that's an important thing to consider. Okay, so I've looked at some of the evidence on cell phones and that sort of thing. A lot of correlation without a cause and effect relationship established. And I said this afternoon. If we made our decisions based on correlation, for those of you who didn't hear it, I'll repeat it. In societies where more women are getting driver's licenses, the breast cancer rate's going up. So we obviously should take driver's licenses away from women as a breast cancer reduction strategy. Okay, we're not going to do that. Here's another one, and it's true, I can prove it to you. In countries where there are more phone poles being erected, there's an increased risk of heart attack. So do not buy a house near a phone pole. Okay, now nobody would act on that, right? And the reason is because these are markers for things. And I think it's really very important that we look at correlation versus cause and effect relationship. And then if we do that, we end up with a shorter list of things to do that might be doable by more people. A lot of people, I think, benefit from coming to Hippocrates, and it's a wonderful place to go. A lot of people can't do that, and they're going to have to do something in the environment that they live in. So for people who are out there watching this, who are saying, I really don't have the option to disconnect the router in my house because my kids can't do their homework, and I can't fly to Florida for 3 weeks or a month or whatever to spend time at Hippocrates. I think we could really make a lot of people feel more helpless than they feel at the medical center, at the university, if we don't dial this back just a little bit to talk about what people can do and make them feel empowered in their own environments. So I support a lot of what's being said here, and I think everybody has to make their own decision, but I'm the compliance dissenter, because people have to be able to follow through and do the things that we're talking about, not for a week, not for 10 days, but for a long time. And that has to be factored into the decision making. So I just thought I should insert that.
So the question is, what is the non-negotiable, basically, Steve? So make it simple. It's got to be organic, and don't eat GMO food, right? So if you know it's genetically modified, don't eat it, which pretty much eliminates about 95, 98% of anything that's on the shelves, right? Right to start with. So if you can't pronounce the ingredients in it, don't eat it, right? So eat organic, eat non-GMO, and eat what you like. Eat what tastes good to you. If it's growing from the ground, God made it, it's probably pretty good for you. Nature's medicine's everywhere. It's in foods, it's in herbs, it's in roots. And if you don't want to eat meat, that's fine. Be sure that you get your protein and other nutrients from something else. If you do, I eat meat, but it's organic, grass-fed beef if I eat it. If it's salmon, it's Atlantic, wild-caught. If it's eggs, it's pastured organic eggs. So if you like those, eat them. But make sure it's not GMO, it's organic. And try to eat, like Dr. Mercola said in our last documentary, eat real food. If you go back, try to put yourself back 100 to 150 years, right? And if they ate it then, when the incidence of cancer was like 1 in 80, 1 in 100, you can eat it now. But a lot of foods we're eating now, they didn't have back then. So try to make it simple for you. Eat real food.
Yeah, well, I think the sugar issue is a problem. It's very hard the body makes sugar. You can stop all the sugar you want, but the body's gluconeogenesis makes sugar. Mm-hmm. All right. So and if you eat a lot of meat, the amino acids are converted into glucose. Mm-hmm. So I agree with the raw food. Just eat little of it. Good raw food in lower amounts, I think will be the best approach. Some people say, well, I got to eat a lot of meat now because I'm not eating sugar. That's not good. But eating whole vegetables may not be good either. It's very hard to know this. It's each person has to know what they need to do, but I would agree with the organic and raw foods and cooked foods, and as long as it's in small quantities.
That's the key to life, period. Not just cancer, but living longer.
Yeah, it's not the quantity of food, it's the quality of food. And let's say that we want to do it all on our own at home. For sure, there is a lot of documentaries, there is a lot of books you can follow and get recipes and start at home. You know, for our guests, for example, many of them do go home and this is brand new for them. It's easy, for example, at the Institute, all the food, the juices, it's all made for you, and you're sitting at the table and it's all there. And then it hits you the last day you're at the Institute, like, I gotta go home, this has gotta be part of my life. But you also, if you have stage 3 or stage 4 or stage 1, doesn't matter, cancer, you are in a time that is kind of extreme right now. And then extreme measures is what helps it. So extreme measures in medicine would be to just knock it out with chemo and radiation. The extreme measures for us is to be 100% on a raw food diet and eat a live food, stay on a vegan diet, and stay out of anything that would feed it. So that's the extreme measures that we have.
Professor Seyfried, you were saying that glucose and glutamine are feeding the cancer cells. So if we can construct a diet so that we don't get glucose, what can we do to stop putting glutamine in our body and get it out?
You can't do it.
That's the part.
You can't do it. It's not possible. So, because the glutamine is the most abundant amino acid in the body, and it can be made from other sources. It's called non-essential. So, your body makes it. You can make it from glucose, as a matter of fact.
Even plants, you get glutamine from.
Yeah, so it's not, we need drugs, unfortunately. But the drugs can be specific and in low dose, as long as it's working with all of the other things. So there's no way in the diet you're going to target glutamine.
So,
As far as I know, it's just, glutamine is such an important amino acid, part of the urea cycle. You know, it's part of our immune system. Our gut needs glutamine. Glutamine is and the cancer cell needs glutamine.
so in the last 500 patients that you're aware of who followed this protocol, what happened? Were they able to do better than traditional cancer patients by following this no glucose,
No one
glutamine?
has done this. It hasn't been done. We were the first to try it on a brain cancer patient, but we used chloroquine and EGCG, that's the green tea extract. It's not as powerful. There are the drugs out there, 6-diazonorlucine, but they're toxic, but you have to know how to use them in very you have to know how to strategically use them to not harm the body. There are drugs available. I think it's going to have to come down to a combination of very healthy, nutritious foods and specific kinds of drugs. And it has to be done strategically. Somebody has to know how to do this.
So if someone followed the exact protocol that you believe would work best, what would you predict would be their success rate against cancer versus traditional cancer treatments?
You know, it's hard to say because, we know, let's put it this way. We can't know until we do the correct kinds of studies. And right now, in the big hospitals, we have standard of care with metabolic therapy. Metabolic therapy includes targeting glucose and glutamine, maintaining the correct nutritional balances that you need. And the missing group from all of the studies that have been done, to my mind, is the key control group with metabolic therapy without standard of care.
Yeah.
And that's the missing group.
They're hard to find.
And you can't get anybody to do it. No hospital will allow it.
Exactly.
So the very organization that needs to be involved with this is part of the problem. And without that group, we cannot answer specifically your question.
The only way that it could be done is to do what Dr. Esselstyn did with heart disease, which is basically people go to him who are volunteering. They're saying, I don't want any more drugs, I don't want to have any more procedures, I'm going to do what you say, and then he's followed them for 32 years. And that's the only way I see it happening. So we're starting to do that. We're starting we're enrolling cancer patients in a survey program to track them and their decisions so that someday, probably after I'm long gone, we'll be able to answer that question. But you're right, because it's considered unethical to not give patients treatments, even if they don't work, if it's the standard of care. So you can't have that control group.
Well, then we have to come to the changing of the policy. And that what I'm doing is writing case reports and publishing them in the literature, which allow physicians to look and say, maybe we should do this on a bigger scale. And that's one of the ways we can, because you got to break the system the way it is, because it's not working for so many people. And I think we need the groups, and the scientific evidence is there. It's not like this is all unknown. I mean, there's thousands of research papers to say that this will work. It's just that it hasn't been done. And who pays for this? Right? When you do a clinical trial, there's a lot of issues. You have to have a hospital that buys on. You have to have a sufficient amount of money to pay the physicians, to recruit the patients. Who wants to pay for a possible therapy that may not generate the same degree of revenue that other therapies generate?
Right.
That's the problem.
Right? So I had a patient, I gave a talk at a hospital up in Michigan, Sparrow Hospital actually, and I was telling people this, and one of the radiation guys gets so angry he wanted to leave. And I asked him later, I said, why are you so angry? He said, well, if this stuff you're talking about, we're going to have to close half the hospitals in the country because radiation generates so much revenue, it keeps the other processes going. And I said, what the hell? I don't know how to address that.
Right.
So this is,
can
you're
you
up against
imagine
a revenue generation system as well.
we devalue human life to such a point. What happened to these young doctors? I mean, I don't know a doctor that did not get into it for the right reason. When you're 18, 19 years old, you don't say, hey, I want to go through 12 years of education to make a fairly poor salary. They did it for the right reason. But somehow that whole process. I had in my office 4 years ago a former dean, and I won't name the school, of a major Ivy League medical school. And his wife had come to us from reverse liver cancer. And he came in and he was so, elated that we healed his wife. And after he talked for about a minute, I said, number one, how long have you been married? And he said, 38 years. I said, okay. I said, have you learned to respect your wife? Oh, yes, I respect her. I said, then how do you think I healed her? Go out and hug her. She healed herself, and you should be lucky because God forbid she died, you wouldn't know what to do. And he finally laughed. He was first offended, and then he laughed. Then he was walking out, and he said, I'll do anything to help you. And I said, no. I said, wait a minute. Come and sit down. And I said, what happens when you're training oncologists? Is it intentional that you get people to immediately act on the protocol? And he said, yes. He said, if we give anyone, a patient, time to think about what happened with their father, their mother, their neighbor, their cousin, through the treatments that we're offering, most people would back out of it. So I heard it from the horse's mouth, to say. Number two, one of my team members, Dr. Maharaj, one of the most notable stem cell doctors on the planet Earth. He and I have had the conversation about glutamine, and he suspects that in the future, he's not quite sure, he's playing with it now, there's ways to overwhelm the glutamine with fresh cells, stem cells. And he's more so focused on the brain because glutamine is a critical part of brain function at this point. And too much glutamine in the brain equals what? Alzheimer's disease. So it doesn't only create cancer conditions, there's a whole, and I think we're going to learn more as time goes on with these things. So possibly stem cells will be an answer, but at this point we don't know that.
Eric. Eric, you've written 2 documentaries on Stanislaw Brzezinski. If you go look do a Google search, you'll find lots of people writing the most horrible things, calling him every name in the book, saying he's a fraud, he's a fake, he's a hoax, he's a quack. It's people trying to steal your money. It's the worst of everything. And people, write long, detailed things. They document, I followed up on the documentaries and these patients, and this person died, and that person died. And you would come away thinking, this is a very bad thing to get involved with. This guy obviously is not on the up and up. You are as close to this as anyone I know. You've written 2 documentaries. You followed the research. I don't think you have any benefit to overstating the benefit. What, in your opinion, even if there's been no studies, is the reality? Does he have something that is working better than you can get from conventional medicine? Should a cancer patient do this as opposed, well, I don't know how to say that. Would you advise, do you believe that without clinical trials, but do you believe based on your research that what he is offering works better than what the standard care is? And why do you believe that? And why are there such bad things being written on the internet?
Yeah, I'd love to address all of that. Okay, well, when it comes to I'll address the internet part second. Again, as a storyteller, what I loved about the Brzezinski story was this guy, this brilliant scientist from Poland. He had accomplished a lot of things early on in Poland, and because of that, and being the sort of superstar scientist, the communist regime wanted him. But he had this new strain of peptides he discovered. He didn't really understand what the heck they were. As one guy said, it's like finding a bunch of new islands off the coast of Miami. What the hell are these things this guy discovered? He didn't really understand how they related to cancer until he started researching what the heck they are. So he was testing these new peptides, like these new islands off the coast of Miami, different ages of people, different races, different sexes, and eventually people with different diseases. And people living with cancer, by and large, had a low count of these peptides. So like any brilliant scientist, you just put 2 and 2 together, like maybe this has something to do with cancer. Let's go down this road. So, he was funded by the National Cancer Institute in the 1970s to study this. He was teaching college at Baylor College of Medicine. This is after he ran from Poland with $20 in his pocket and his discovery in his briefcase, essentially. Spent almost all of his money on cab fare from JFK to Queens, when he arrived. But anyway, so here's a man that was a scientist that was sponsored by the National Cancer Institute. They knew what he had was something. They wanted to bring him into the fold, and Brzezinski, being sort of the kind of stubborn guy, honestly, I got to admire him because I don't think he'd still be here today if he wasn't so damn stubborn. But they wanted to bring him into the fold, but he would lose his rights over this therapy. I promise I'll get to your question. I just can't help it. I'm always long-winded. So, but that being said, he decided to go it alone. And at the time, the state of Texas was kind of the renegade state that it still kind of is. And he figured out a way to go it alone. So he opened up his own little clinic in a little strip mall. These people were going to him that were, told they could just pack your stuff, you're done. Imagine it was going through someone's brain, going to a little tiny office in a little tiny strip mall from the guy from Poland who doesn't hardly speak any English, who has some kind of peptides. He's going to stick in you for 24 hours a day. I mean, these are desperate people. And he started curing people. But get to your point about clinical trials, is it real? It is real. Is it a magic bullet? No. But he has discovered something very significant. And the only reason that he has gone through FDA trials, not because the FDA said, oh yeah, come on along. They went after him, grand jury after grand jury. They tried to take this guy out at every turn. And what happened was the FDA, being as arrogant as well, they thought, oh, this guy, we're putting this guy in jail. He's never going to see the light of day. You're the FDA. We're taking this guy down. So when they finally got an indictment through him through these grand juries, they had no choice but to open clinical trials. That's the only way they could get away with going forward. Mm-hmm. So let's put this patient in the clinical trials. That's the ethical thing to do. Once this guy's in jail, it's all over with, and we'll move along and move on to our next abomination, whatever. But so Brzezinski kicked their ass 2 times in court, 2 sets of juries, not guilty, running free. So FDA just shot themselves in the foot. So is there testing? Absolutely. But did he apply for the therapy, the clinical trials like Pfizer would? No. Yeah, they had by default to allow him to open up phase 2 studies. And because he ended up with a lot of brain tumor patients, kind of by accident, because most people that are getting a glioblastoma or a brain stomach glioma, they're again told nothing we can do. Your tumor's all over your brain, it's like a big spider, and you can't get surgery. Radiation is just going to fry you. There's no chemotherapy because it can't cross the blood-brain barrier. And off to Brzezinski they go. So that's what mainly his clinical trials were concentrated on, kind of by default. So regardless of the mechanism of action, Forgive me if I'm talking really fast. I'm obviously very passionate. But he has something. And so, like, if I had a brain tumor, I would seriously consider going to him. Absolutely. There's no question. Only because of the track record and clinical trial data piled on to prove that it has cured glioblastoma in phase 2 studies. Now I'm going to get to the internet because it all overlaps. So what's going on the internet is what's called an AstroTurf campaign. What this is a term for fake grassroots. This was spawned originally by the cigarette companies in the late 90s when the government took them to court, and these guys are running around going, nicotine's not addictive, are you crazy? I don't know what you're talking about. And they had all these smokers' rights group that popped up out of nowhere. People think, oh, look at all these smokers asking for their rights. No, the tobacco companies created these groups. And I'm honestly in a weird way kind of flattered that my Brzezinski movie was so famous that it became this viral hit that they had to call out the big dogs. So they control these AstroTurf groups. They call themselves things like the Skeptics for the Protection of Cancer Patients and all this ridiculous names. These are like 4 guys, kind of like, I'm sure you heard with like the whole election, like the Twitter farms coming out of Russia. You ever heard about all this? It's the same idea. You have a group of guys that understand this, understand how to create up multiple Twitter accounts, multiple Facebook pages, blogs, and they make it seem like there's this big movement, like all this activists. It's complete nonsense. It's like 3 guys that are paid quite well by the industry. They're like top dogs. This is what they do for a living. These same guys were hired by Pepsi Cola. These are the same guys that went after the Vaxxed documentary. Same guys. These are the same guys that support Monsanto at every turn. If anybody goes after Monsanto, these guys come in and they confuse everybody. They hijacked all of the Wikipedia pages. They took 3 Brzezinski Wikipedia pages, Stanislaw's page, personal page, his clinic page, and his company page, merged them into one, and they control it. They own it. You try to change it, forget it. I'm deathly afraid of having my own Wikipedia page. I don't know what they do to me. I'm so happy. I'm saying this now, and the Labcast, they're probably busy right now watching me, and I'm going to have a Wikipedia page up tomorrow. But I'm telling you, it is the stuff on the internet is so hard, man, because you don't know what I know. You go to the internet, you look up Brzezinski, you think this guy's like a murdering lunatic. And the thing is that's what he has threatened. He is really a threat because it's whether or not you believe in it or whatever, or whether or not believe in the methodology, the reality is this is a pharmaceutical grade, patented drug that has completed phase 2 clinical trials overseen by the FDA that one man owns. And here's the big kicker. You ready? Give me 1 more 2 minutes. I was so close to this story with the whole Axelrod thing ties in. So he's in phase 2 studies. He cures what's called a DIPG, a diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. This is an extremely rare tumor that happens in children, and only 400 children in the United States get this tumor, maybe 40 in the UK. 90% of the kids that have ever been diagnosed with this in the history of humans are dead at 2 years. There's not a single walking survivor that I'm aware of. If you guys know one, please that is walking around today with a DIPG that has made it past 5 years, period. Except for where? Brzezinski's clinical trials. And there are not a huge amount, but there's not a lot of them. But about a 30% cure rate, roughly, depending on the trial. That's huge. These kids that were kids now have their own kids. But because of the incredible success with this one tumor type, this is where the rubber hits the road, guys. You ready? You think the David Axelrod story was heavy? Listen to this. So here he is, forced, the FDA was essentially forced, no choice. Okay, we got to give this guy permission for phase 3 randomized studies. We have no choice. So Brzezinski was faced with a couple of tasks. I need like $150 million to freaking pay for these things. Like he was saying, these things are not cheap. And secondly, because there's no standard of care other than radiation for a DIPG, there's no chemotherapy approved for it. Never been cured. Why bother for only 400 kids a year? Who wants to spend the money on researching this? So he just had to kind of go, okay, 2 groups of kids with DIPG, they both get radiation, they're both going to end up with learning disabilities, it's just going to fry the brain, it's right in the brainstem. They're never going to be normal if they're cured. And they add anti-neoplastons to one group. What else can I do, Eric? We had a long conversation. It's not that I'm just a journalist, but I had no choice. And all of his supporters were like, you saying you can't give radiation? It's like, this is the FDA, guys. We have no choice. Unfortunately, these kids are going to have to make the fall to save a lot more kids later. It just sucks. And, what are you going to do? So he gets past that obstacle. Now it's time for the hospitals. You ready? Every single children's hospital in the United States of America and Canada and England, St. Jude's, Boston Children's, you name the children's hospital, you think of it, they said, nope, not on our property. We're not doing these trials. We had the money, we had the data, we had the protocols ready, and no children's hospital in the United States would allow a phase 3 clinical study that only 400 kids a year in this country get, all of them die, to be performed on their property. So the FDA probably were like, oh, here you go, here's your permission. Yeah, good luck finding a hospital. So you talk about, you can talk about good and evil, you can talk about all this, but I'm telling you guys, just from where I'm sitting, in my personal opinion, this is big stuff. Yours is a systemic problem. You're going to take down an industry. You think, oh, but hey, Eric, it's only 400 kids. You ready? Here's the problem. You go through these studies, and he cures a couple kids, say. You're going to get it approved. You're going to get it on the market. The problem lays here. This is what Axelrod was getting at. This is what everybody, if you really spend enough time with this, is where it comes down to. You think, oh, it's just 400 kids a year. Once you approve anti-neoplastons for anything, even a rare brain tumor like brainstem glioma, nowadays, if you or I or anybody in this audience get cancer and you say, I know about chemo and radiation, but I'm also aware of this anti-neoplastons thing. I've watched this documentary this guy Eric did, or my uncle's blah, blah, whatever. If you have the money, and even if Medicare and your insurance won't pay for it, you can insist off-label to get it. And if you have stage 4 pancreatic, I want anti-neoplastons. I don't care if it's approved brain tumors. I want it. I'm going to pay for it. I'm a millionaire. Who cares? So what I'm saying is, can you imagine what the industry would do if everybody lined up and had fundraisers and said, screw you, chemotherapy. I'm going for anti-neoplastons first, and I'll deal with you chemotherapy later if this fails. That's where we're at. And that's what Brzezinski threatens. So is it a magic bullet? No. But what I love about the story is, and I really respect everything you guys do, and there's everything to be respected, but just from a storyteller, Brzezinski is really an anomaly. I mean, the fact that he's still around is amazing. Pharmaceutical grade, true competitor to the industry. Everybody that's sitting up here also competes, but not like that. He's got the ammunition to take him down at the market level, and that's what they're afraid of. And the AstroTurf campaigners will come out, they will scare you, they will do everything. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they had something to do with scaring the shit out of the hospitals. Because think about it. And why would the hospital go out on a limb? Why would any of them? To be destroyed by this industry, but for just doing the right thing. We'll do the clinical trials. And so I'll stop talking in a minute, but there's one thing I was going to say. But anyway, I'm going to stop right there. So obviously, Brzezinski thing is very passionate for me, so yeah.
So I want to know how we get the bots working for us.
I wish I could tell you, I know, it's tough. Because what you guys are doing is so out of the box. Like as he was saying, who's going to pay for a clinical trial based on a dietary adjustment? And Brzezinski, at least you kind of get it because it fits within their box. Mm-hmm. This is, you guys are at an uphill battle. I mean, it's about education and it's about, I don't know. I really wish I could answer that question for you. Yeah.
When we were attacked a few years ago, we actually had people in Washington. There's 500 of us, a target. I'm sure you're on the list. And
yes, I am. I know I am, actually.
The cola industry, the Pepsi Cola industry, food industry, and the pharmaceutical spend approximately $80 million a year just on attacking this industry. So that was revealed to us. And the average innocent person who believes the internet is all factual and true doesn't know that. They actually went as far as saying that Anna Marie and I kill babies. Even if you like me, if you think I kill babies, you won't like me anymore. This is how low these people are.
Ty, you made a series called The Truth About Cancer. It wasn't one part, it was like 7 or 8 parts. Each was like, I don't know how long, an hour, 2 hours. It was really long. It was really intense. You spoke to a ton of people. It was the most researched document. And if anyone is interested in cancer, I hope you're enjoying this panel, but you should buy The Truth About Cancer. It was 100 times more detailed from the history. It goes in, and it was crazy. And I was sitting there in shock thinking, how was this not a mainstream information? So from your whole experience that you and Charlene had, even though there might not be a test or a study, is there something that you feel works? Just like Eric is saying, he feels like these antineoplasms work. Was there something in your travels with all these doctors and all over that in your gut, even if you don't have a study to prove it, that you're thinking you feel in your gut, if it was properly studied, would certainly show up as a better treatment or more effective treatment than the standard of care right now?
Yeah, good question, Stephen. And actually, we've done 4 documentaries now. We're about to release our 5th. So we've done one called The Quest for the Cures. The Quest for the Cures continues, a global quest. Truth about vaccines, truth about pet cancer, and now we're about to release Eastern medicine. So this will be our 6th one. So we've done a lot of different documentaries on cancer, one on vaccines. And just one that just jumps out at me, not necessarily the best one, but it's the therapy that Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez used to use here in New York City. So Dr. Gonzalez, God bless him, he's rest in peace. He died a couple years ago. He was a good friend and he was a scientist among scientists. I mean, he was just a researcher, a medical doctor, Columbia, Sloan Kettering. He was just, he had impeccable credentials, and he just was a researcher. And he learned about this dentist in Dallas, Texas, that was using a therapy that was healing cancer patients, named Dr. Donald Kelly. He had actually healed his own pancreatic cancer with this treatment. So Dr. Gonzalez went down to Dallas to show that Dr. Kelly was a quack. In the interview that I did with him a few years ago, he said they went down, he and a group of physicians went down to show that Dr. Kelly was a quack. And they started examining his patient records. And Dr. Gonzalez personally examined over 10,000 of his patient records. And he realized after examining 10,000 records that he was actually healing over 90% of his patients when it comes to 5-year survival. 90%. And at that point, he realized that he hadn't been taught how to treat cancer properly in medical school, and that Columbia University didn't know, and that Sloan Kettering didn't know. And he adopted the Kelly protocol, turned it into the Gonzalez protocol, which is based upon using a lot of proteolytic, which is protein digesting enzymes. Cancer cells have a protein coating. They're kind of invisible to the immune system. And so by using enzymes, they would digest the coating around the cancer cell, make it visible to the immune system, and the immune system could go to work. And that's a simplified version of the treatment, of course. Everyone had an individualized diet that he put them on. He used detoxification. He used coffee enemas to help to detoxify the liver. Exercise. It was a complete protocol, but that was the basis of it. And it worked really, really well. And that's one of the ones that has stood out to me. Interestingly, I just went to Asia. I've mentioned this several times, but it's because it's fresh in my mind. And in the Philippines, in Manila, very, very, very poor country. The average medical doctor in the Philippines makes $1,400 a month. Medical doctors, okay? So they're not in it for the money. And that's one of the things I really loved about the doctors that we visited is they weren't in it for the money. They wanted to heal patients. But patients don't, the average person makes $200 a month in Manila, in the Philippines. They don't have money to be taking 80 enzymes a day. They don't make enough money to even buy 2 bottles that in a month. So they have to have cheap treatments. And this one doctor that I interviewed, and I'll wrap it up really quickly because I know we got other questions for other people. Dr. Jimmy DiLiaco, an 87-year-old medical doctor in the Philippines, is using raw pork pancreas to get the enzymes for the patients. It's pennies to get pig pancreas. And raw beef liver. Sounds nasty, look nasty, probably tastes nasty. But I interviewed a dozen of his patients down there, and he said he's got over 10,000 that he's worked with over the years that have responded well to this therapy. It's dirt cheap. It supplies your body. I mean, that's what the enzymes are made from anyway. They're made from pancreas. But the pancreatic enzymes are made from pancreas. He just goes to the raw stuff because it's cheaper for the people of the Philippines, and it's working. And he cured his own cancer. He worked actually with Dr. Kelly before Dr. Kelly met Dr. Gonzalez. And Dr. Kelly cured Dr. Jimmy's cancer with this protocol, with the proteolytic enzymes. And Dr. Jimmy went back to Manila and kind of adapted it for the poor people there and started using raw pancreas and raw liver, working fantastic. Yeah.
So for the final question, having said everything you said, in the end of the day, if someone has cancer and they go and they're told you should need to go on chemo and radiation right away, that's the best thing to do. And if they say, well, I went to a conference, I heard some people speak, they go, you know, I don't know if they're doctors, they're not oncologists. I mean, in the end of the day, what are you, this should have been the first question, but at the end of the day, is chemo and radiation an appropriate choice? Sometimes, never, most of the time. Like, if the standard of care is chemo and radiation, and someone's very smart, very confident, very strong-willed doctor says you should go on it immediately, you know, what would you say to someone about who said that? What would you say to someone who received that advice from their doctor?
Well, I think the first thing is it's important to help people learn how to communicate with their doctors differently. It's been stated a lot of times, the doctor works for you, but patients don't understand that very well. And so one thing, we role play with people. You're going to go back and see your oncologist, and he says you need to start treatment on Friday, next Friday. So ask him, what would happen if you waited a couple, 3 weeks, because you need some time to organize things and figure it out. I mean, the less you say, the better, because they get apoplectic if they think you're going to do something else, right? And here's what it's very interesting because this has happened on numerous occasions. The person says walks in, the doctor says, got to start next Friday. I understand, doctor, but I have some affairs to get in order and some things to check out and that sort of thing. So if I waited until 3 weeks from next Friday to start treatment, what would happen? Well, I think it's better if you start next week, but okay, so now we're saying 3 weeks from next Friday, so that would be the end of February then, right? The story changes when people bring that up. So I think that's the first thing is to teach the patient to have a constructive dialogue with the doctor. Another thing is I would like to see studies on the treatment you're recommending and outcomes for patients, published studies. And I want to review them. Well, what they're going to do is come into the office and we'll help them review them. But the reason this becomes so important is the patient's frame of mind, which I think everybody's been talking about as being very important, to be settled about not saying no to chemo if it's a bad idea, and no to radiation is a bad idea. It's much easier for the patient to do that and to feel confident about it when it says in writing, the patient who does this has a 30% chance of living 2 years. It becomes very crystal clear when the decisions are data-driven. I mean, I know I sometimes sound like an extreme nut up here when I keep saying we got to look at studies. We have to look at studies. Studies can be instructive for a lot of things, including helping people understand why not to do things. All right. So getting data, and if sometimes doctors refuse to provide it, I think that speaks volumes to the patient. Everything we do at our office. You saw my slides this afternoon, studies on all of them, references in my books, references on our materials. So when they've seen all that and then the doctor refuses to provide it, I think it speaks volumes to the patient and it lessens that feeling of this person graduated from Harvard, he must know what he's talking about. Then the third thing would be, if you're not going to do those things, then let's start looking at alternatives. And to Steve's question, the one thing I do encourage people to consider if it's doable is water fasting. There is some wonderful data starting to emerge about, and that's basically what Tom was talking about earlier, is in a state of ketosis, you're starving the cancer cells. Cancer cells don't do well without fuel. Normal human cells do. And so if there's an opportunity to do water fasting as part of the treatment, I think it's a good idea if the person can do it. So I think the key is you have to diffuse the power dynamic with the doctor. And I don't think that it helps sometimes if you try to disconnect people from doctors because the family gets really apoplectic then. So if you can find a way to talk to the doctor in terms that diffuse that power relationship because I would love to deal with people who have cancer without their families, but that's not real life. So we have to deal with that. So I think if we diffuse that power dynamic and keep the family from getting apoplectic, we can buy some time to have calm and thinking and research and decision making, and that's where your best outcomes are going to come from. And by the way, that's the way best outcomes come from anything. I said this afternoon, think about how you buy cars and houses and retirement accounts and college educations for your kids and blenders and washing machines. They're not snap decisions generally, right? You take time to think about it and consider. So if you can just get people to buy this the way they buy everything, we could solve a lot of problems.
Would you repeat the question, Stephen?
If someone was advised to get chemo and radiation by their doctor, what is your? It probably should have been my very first question, but is it a good decision? Is it some cases it's good, in some cases it's not, or you can't? I mean, what is your overall thought on chemo and radiation? And are there times when it should be used, or you feel it's something almost never? What's your thought on chemo and radiation?
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought it was. I just want to make sure I answered the right question. So I'm just going to speak personally. The only way that I would never do chemo and radiation unless it were something like a low-dose chemo, which is potentiated by insulin. It's called IPTLD. That's a very, very low-dose chemotherapy that doesn't have the side effects. And a lot of doctors in Asia are using insulin to not only potentiate chemo, but also quercetin or resveratrol or turmeric. I mean, they're using insulin to potentiate a lot of different substances into the cancer cells, because cancer cells they use insulin kind of as a Trojan horse to get a substance into the cells. So that would be the only time I personally would do chemo. I would never do radiation, but that's just me personally. I believe that cancer is a symptom. See, the problem is that we treat symptoms and not the causes. And so you have a tumor, we want to shrink it, and we want to cut it out, we want to radiate it, we want to put in some chemo just to make sure that it stays small. The tumor's your body telling you that there's something wrong. But we don't treat the root cause anymore in the United States, at least. We treat the symptom. And so we feel like if we've shrunk the tumor, that we've done a good job. The reality is that whatever the underlying problem is in your body is still there. You just shrunk the tumor. I've used this analogy before, but if your check engine light on your truck starts to flashing, it's telling you there's something wrong with the truck. But you don't smash it with a hammer and say, my truck's fixed. But that's kind of what we do with tumors. The tumor's a symptom that there's something wrong with your body. And so we got to get to the underlying root cause of the problem. And so chemotherapy and radiation are at best, they're Band-Aids to patch a symptom, but they'll never cure, because that's not the problem. You're not chemo or radiation deficient. Your body's crying for help. And the way that you get help is through nutrition, through detoxification, through bringing your body back, giving your body what it needs so that it will do the healing. And I just would never personally do the chemo or radiation.
So a lot of people think they find maybe a little lump, let's say in the breast, and they think that magically it will go away by itself. And they wait and wait, and this thing grows and grows. And it would be this magic pill to take chemo or radiation to make it shrink and make it feel better and make you feel like you did something. And that is, there are times when that is needed, but it's really also a fool's game, because the tumor, the cancer is there. Like Ty said, yes, it's smaller. You look at the x-ray and it's like, yeah, it went from 7 centimeter to 3 centimeter. What the heck does that mean? It's there. So you kind of feel like you're buying time, and now I can maybe get on the lifestyle and start doing really good things for me and get rid of the rest. But I have, at that same time, I have deprived my whole system to fight on its own. And now, my cancer, it was big, it's a little bit smaller, but now my immune system is deprived, and now I want to have it worked 100%. And so now I'm going for lifestyle. You need a lot more work now because you did the chemo and then radiation than you did ever before. So it is a tough question, because we all want to see things shrink in a hurry. but it's not happening like that. If we come, for example, I just talked to a guest before we left. She came, she stayed 6 weeks with us, and she had a lump in her breast. She had x-ray, and that's gone. And that's gone in a very short time. And she's very happy. Is the cancer all gone? That we don't know, but you keep doing. That's why you stay on a 100% raw food diet, and that's why we found with people that are working in this field with raw live food too, that for the next 2 years, you just stay on the course. And all this testing that we keep doing with CAT scans and PET scans, which brings so much radiation. What were we afraid of with Chernobyl and Fukushima that's still leaking, actually? What were we so afraid of? Because it causes cancer. What happened in Chernobyl was thyroid cancer and many other forms of cancer, of course, leukemia, lymphoma. So here we're blasting ourselves every 3 months, especially if you're doing cancer treatments. You're doing chemotherapy or radiation every 3 months. You have another CAT scan, and you just bring in your body to have to fight so much for weeks and weeks, maybe months, to fight just the side effects from that test. So go from better tests like MRI, but without contrast. Go for ultrasound, and go for thermography. Thermography, which is just camera, which actually gets a picture of your whole body in colors. It's just amazing. And Duke University can read that for you, and a lot of doctors are trained in that. Probably your oncologist would not want to see or hear about that picture, but there are a lot of doctors that understands it. And thermography is very simple. You sit in a cold room, they take a picture, they make it even colder, take another picture, and then they compare what happened. And if there's a degree of heat in your body, let's say if I have breast cancer, or I didn't know that I had breast cancer, this can be 8 years false positive, and I can actually see something that maybe now I want to do an MRI without contrast though. Thank you.
This is the most serious question you've asked tonight, and people sitting here in this room in New York in January, and people listening around the world today, live streamed, as well as over the years to come, I want to be very clear that this is something that you've got to think a lot about, and you've got to learn a lot about. Now, these are undeniable facts. Let's give the facts to you. Chemo and radiation weaken the immune system and precipitate cancer. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. I don't need medical literature to see it, although I've read thousands of studies that say that, because I see it. Most people that come to us with cancer have done chemotherapy and radiation and done biopsies, which, like Thomas said, no question spreads it, but it's a state of how they test so that they can document that, the tissue. And the truth of the matter is, even some of those people recover. Now, I pondered this 30 years ago. How much more difficult is it for a person to recover after they've had bombardments at high degrees for long periods of time? It's about 3 times harder. So the more treatment, the more devastated the body is, the more scar tissue you have, the more failure you've had emotionally, because one woman that reversed cancer, I was in Dublin, Ireland about 15 years ago, and she came to me. She waited till 250 people filed out of the room. And I was packing up the computer, and she said, you know, I had cancer, and all the doctors, the best doctors here at Trinity in Dublin, told me I'm going to be completely well. And I did everything they said. And now the cancer came back. What should I do? So I don't give people answers. I said, now let me ask you a question. You just spent 5 minutes telling me that the best doctors in this country told you that you were going to be healed. They used the word cured, didn't they? Oh yeah, every one of them said I'd be cured. Did it work? I said. And she thought for a minute. She said, no. I said, now you're asking me to tell you if you should do the very same thing that didn't work before. Will you please give me the answer? She said, but I want the answer from you. I said, I don't have cancer. I'm not going to give you the answer. You give me the answer. Well, she gave me the answer. No, I'm not going to do that. She's written 4 books. I don't know how many people's lives she saved. And that's what happens when you have the courage to become you and to become knowledgeable and to be educated. It's not about taking life away when you say to people, that may be a dangerous treatment. It may be saving lives.
Well, I know it's getting late, and I don't want to go on about this. I know it's getting late, and I don't want to go on too much, but it might be okay, chemo and radiation, certain kinds of indications where they've had a success rate of very high, and sometimes you can find that, where I don't want to ever use the word cure, but where the management is cancer is resolved, and for years and years, if they have a very small lesion or something like this and low dose chemo, maybe it's okay. But I don't think it's good for the majority of cancers, and I think that why would we do that when we can do something else? If I can kill tumor cells without toxicity, I'm going that route.
Yeah, I mean, you consider kind of, I don't mean to just regurgitate everything everybody said, but essentially, when you're diagnosed with cancer, you're like, okay, let's get rid of these tumors, but just getting rid of the tumors doesn't get rid of the problem. And so I don't know, man. I mean, it's really tough. It's hard to put I don't want to keep copying out of your questions to you, but I would try to go the non-toxic route if possible. I think I'd have to really think hard about radiation. I don't know I could go anywhere near that in any form. But yeah, I mean, if I had a really hideous bulk of tumors in my abdomen and they're like, you can't go through surgery, you're going to have a colostomy bag, you're going to lose some organs, but you can maybe do chemo, got some good data to show that, based on what you've got, it could push it back far enough until we can do the next step. I might think about it. Can't say I would, but it's just there's so many ways to go after it. But most importantly thing here is that it's not just a box of the big 3, chemo, surgery, radiation. There's a lot of other options out there in the sense that where it can become this very complementary sort of thing that you're doing, and a lot of trial and error. But the most important thing is it isn't so cut and dry. It is their box of chemo, radiation, and surgery, but there's a much larger toolbox out there that these guys have been working on for a long time that is there. So it's just, I would start with the mainstream stuff. How much data you got? Use your common sense. Radiation, yeah, Chernobyl, Hiroshima, like, why are we giving us radiation? I mean, the industry, yeah. And, it's the same thing again, I don't want to harp on this, but, somebody created immunotherapy out of Sloan Kettering in the early 1900s, and the people that were responsible for destroying it was the radiation industry. I mean, this is just an entrenched market that's not going to let go yet. They're not going to let go, and they're going to keep telling you, oh yeah, they make radiation seeds now. Yeah, we do it locally. We'll put it near your organ. Still radiation. I don't know. I really can't answer your question very well, Steve. If I get hit with it, I'll call you up and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I hope it doesn't ever happen, though.
Well, tomorrow after my conference, which is at 2 o'clock, Anna Marie and I will take a few private consultations for 10 minutes each, and the first people we'd like to talk to are those of you enduring cancer, either in the room or locally. So you can go to our booth now after this and sign up.
Okay, I have a few quick comments. 1, after this is over, we have a vegan ice cream for everyone for free. 2, if you want to buy any of the author's books, buy them and bring it to them and have them sign it. That would be great to do that right away. And 3, I just want to make sure everyone understands that this was not a random, frivolous package of, let's have a cancer panel, we'll get some local people. The people on this panel came from all over the world who have spent a tremendous amount of years deeply, deeply studying this industry and these questions. And what's so unique is I truly believe that these are people who are on your side. I have followed them. I believe the only agenda that anyone has is to try to figure out how to be helpful to you. No, they don't make a ton of money on books, so I wouldn't think that's an incentive. I believe their only incentive in getting up each day is to be on your side. And it's not something that you can just assume when you read the paper and get recommendations from government agencies and politicians and the media. So I am personally so grateful that all of you have spent your lives, your time, and your effort, and your anguish and brain power to find this information and then come freely here to share this with us. I'm very grateful to all of you, and I want to thank you. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Stephen. All right.